Konoha, Naruto's evil scientist, under tutelage of Orochimaru. Chapter 21. He tacitly approved it. Amamiya Kenichi scratched his head, suddenly understanding why Tsunade left Konoha. After all, her lover and younger brother died, and her teacher was desecrating the remains of their ancestors. It was indeed disappointing. If the third Hokage hadn't died later, and Naruto hadn't existed, Tsunade probably wouldn't have returned to become the fifth Hokage. After taking Amamiya Kenichi to the training ground for a while, Orochimaru left. However, before leaving, Orochimaru told Amamiya Kenichi to be careful, as the third Hokage seemed to be suspicious of Orochimaru recently. Amamiya Kenichi wasn't surprised to hear this. After all, as the number of consumables decreased, Root would definitely reach out to nearby villages. When more people went missing, Anbu couldn't possibly remain unaware. Exposure was only a matter of time. Your experimental subject, the one whose ribs you removed, is dead. The medical team sent a message saying that their lungs completely ceased functioning, Orochimaru said to Amamiya Kenichi before leaving. Hearing this, Amamiya Kenichi became excited. It seemed that cancer was still a terrifying thing for the ninjas of the ninja world. As long as the general medical team couldn't handle it, that was fine. It seemed that the development and perfection of the cancer infusion technique needed to be accelerated. However, he also had some other ideas on how to improve his strength. I remember, the first Hokage should still be in the Pure Land, right? With my current strength, can I use the impure world reincarnation to summon him? Amamiya Kenichi pondered. He wanted to increase his strength, and Sage Mode was a good choice, but Amamiya Kenichi didn't really want to learn Sage Mode from his teacher. In Amamiya Kenichi's opinion, the Sage Mode from Mount Myoboku and the Slug Sage were better than the Raichi Cave. However, finding Jiraiya at Mount Myoboku and Tsunade at the Slug Sage's place wasn't easy. Since neither Jiraiya nor Tsunade were easy to find, Amamiya Kenichi naturally looked at another target, the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama. His Sage Mode was also very powerful. However, Amamiya Kenichi didn't know where the first Hokage learned Sage Mode from. He only heard that he seemed to have learned it from Shikatsu Forest, but some also said that he comprehended it on his own. Summon the first Hokage with impure world reincarnation and then have him teach me Sage Mode. I wonder if that's feasible. Amamiya Kenichi hesitated. His teacher, Orochimaru, hadn't mastered Sage Mode. Unless he asked his teacher to send him to Raichi Cave to undergo the White Snake Sage's trial, the best way to learn Sage Mode was still from the first Hokage. After all, the first Hokage was famously thick-headed, like an alternate version of Naruto. Such a person shouldn't have any violent thoughts towards him, a junior from Konoha, right? If it were the second Hokage, Amamiya Kenichi wouldn't dare to summon him. If his strength wasn't enough, things could easily go wrong. But Amamiya Kenichi was indeed very envious of the first Hokage's Sage Mode. So, after thinking for a while, Amamiya Kenichi felt that he could try it. However, the sacrifice he found couldn't be too strong. The strength of the sacrifice in the impure world reincarnation also affected the power of the deceased. Simply put, the stronger the sacrifice, the more the deceased could exert their power close to when they were alive. If the strength wasn't enough, then naturally, they wouldn't be too strong. For example, if an ordinary genin was used to reincarnate the first Hokage, it would definitely be impossible to exert his full power, a significant discount was certain. However, Amamiya Kenichi didn't intend to use the first Hokage to fight. He just wanted to learn Sage Mode from the first Hokage. After all, having inherited the first Hokage's Sage body, it would be a waste not to learn Sage Mode. So, for the next month, Amamiya Kenichi was busy preparing the materials for the impure world reincarnation, then improving his strength, and also continuing to develop his ninjutsu. Kenichi, I heard that Uzumaki Kushina is pregnant, Orochimaru said while conducting an experiment. During this time, Orochimaru had obtained an experimental subject from outside, a very precious experimental subject. The other party was from the Kagaya clan. And the Kagaya clan wasn't referring to Otsutsuki Kagaya, but rather the current Bone Pulse Kagaya, which made Amamiya Kenichi salivate a bit. After all, the combat power of Bone Pulse was still very good. However, the research on the 3-Tomo Sharingan was still progressing slowly, and he couldn't research Bone Pulse for the time being. He could only save a sample for future use. Is that so? It seems there's no news of this in the village. Amamiya Kenichi was stunned for a moment. To be honest, although he knew that Naruto would appear in Kushina's belly around this time, there was indeed no news in the village. However, after thinking about it carefully, there was nothing wrong with that. After all, Uzumaki Kushina was not only the wife of the 4th Hokage, but also Konoha's Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. The Jinchuriki's due date could be said to be top secret, and a chunin like Amamiya Kenichi naturally couldn't know. Yes, during this time, Amamiya Kenichi had officially become a chunin. He didn't go through the chunin exams, but after being recommended by Orochimaru, he fought a veteran chunin and was considered to have become a chunin. If this were during a time of war, becoming a chunin would be even easier. Back then, promoting jonin was very fast. Now that the war was over, things had naturally become slightly more normal. However, it would still take some time for the chunin exams to reappear. The relationship between the villages wasn't very good right now. Let alone holding the chunin exams together. If they really did, they'd probably fight like dogs. Moreover, there were so many chunin in the village, it was impossible to always wait for the chunin exams, right? So, in fact, the chunin exams were just another way to show the strength of one's village. Only at specific times would they agree to hold a chunin exams tournament or something. Naturally not. Jinchuriki are very weak during childbirth. If the Nine-Tails were to break free, hee. Orochimaru sneered. The teacher probably won't die, right? Although the teacher seemed to be enjoying his retirement very honestly during this time, Orochimaru could tell that the teacher wasn't very willing. Yes, how many people who are used to wielding power and know the beauty of power are willing to let go at the moment of relinquishing it? People leaving and tea cooling is not just a saying. So, if something really goes wrong, then, beloved teacher, what will you choose? Nine-Tails, can we cut a little bit off for research? Amamiya Kenichi became excited. That was the Nine-Tails, the strongest tailed beast in the ninja world currently. Your idea is very interesting. Orochimaru's lips twitched. His disciple was good in every way, but sometimes he would have some strange ideas. Cut out a part of the Nine-Tails for research. If he didn't know better, he would have thought that his disciple had already become a cage-level powerhouse, able to knead the Nine-Tails at will. Amamiya Kenichi smiled embarrassedly, but he was really interested in the Nine-Tails. After all, the tailed beast ball was still very oppressive in the early stages, and the Nine-Tails also provided a lot of chakra. The village will definitely take this matter very seriously. Be careful about your behavior during this time. Orochimaru reminded Amamiya Kenichi. He knew that his disciple had a good relationship with the 4th Hokage's couple. However, the matter of the Jinchuriki being pregnant involved too many things. If his disciple accidentally got involved, it would be very troublesome. Even he would be in trouble. After all, Amamiya Kenichi was only a chunin, but he was his teacher. Therefore, many times, the things his disciple did would be attributed to him. Okay, teacher, I will be careful. Amamiya Kenichi nodded. However, even if he didn't interfere at all, in the end, the blackened Obito would still come back to release the Nine-Tails. If nothing unexpected happened, the 4th Hokage's couple would still die. Moreover, when you think about it carefully, it's actually quite chilling. When the 4th Hokage was fighting bloody battles, what was the 3rd Hokage doing? What was Danzo doing? What was Orochimaru doing? Not to mention the heads of the Inoshika-cho clans, or the Hyuga and Uchiha clans. Even if the 3rd Hokage went all out, Danzo went all out, and Orochimaru helped out, the 4th Hokage wouldn't have died in battle. The 4th Hokage died, and the 3rd Hokage returned to become the supreme controller of power again. He was still living well, making it hard not to suspect what the 3rd Hokage's intentions were. What's more, Naruto's childhood experiences can be said to be outrageous. It's not that this kind of thing can't happen, but a child who has suffered such treatment actually inherited the will of fire and wanted to become Hokage. It's outrageous that he didn't become a villain. However, I remember that it was originally said that Hokage was a short manga and wouldn't be too long, so the character designs were like that. But later, it became longer and longer, and naturally many people collapsed. Amamiya Kenichi played with the amber in his hand, lost in thought. He remembered that he seemed to have seen a similar argument before, but he didn't really know if Kishimoto had ever said it. However, if analyzed in this way, it could be justified. Looking at the amber in his hand, Amamiya Kenichi revealed a hint of a smile. If we talk about the gains during this period, the biggest gain is not the development of cancer ninjutsu, nor is it tricking a little money back from teacher Orochimaru, but this piece of amber. Before, teacher Orochimaru had suddenly taken a book and found Amamiya Kenichi, then took this piece of amber in his hand and looked at it carefully. After looking at it many times, teacher Orochimaru finally confirmed that this was an ancient parasite. However, it was rumored that it had been easily wiped out by the Sage of Six Paths. Unexpectedly, a piece of amber was left behind, and it also preserved the complete body of the worm. The reason why he wasn't sure before was because there were very few records of this worm. Orochimaru had only obtained an ancient book from outside and confirmed the identity of this worm from the information recorded on it. It was a pity that this worm was already dead, and it was impossible to revive this kind of worm. Orochimaru felt it was a pity, otherwise, this ability to control others would sometimes be quite practical. A parasite that can control others. I wonder what can be gained from studying this thing. Amamiya Kenichi smacked his lips. If this thing can really control ninjas, then its practicality would be too strong. However, in general, it also depends on the limitations of this thing. After all, most parasites that can play a controlling role often kill the host in the end. For example, horsehair worms will cause infected insects to jump into the water, and they will emerge from the insect's body at the same time as they drown. And a very unique double-disc fluke larva will even drill into the snail's eye and control the snail to climb to a high place and constantly squirm, thereby attracting birds to come and eat the snail. It can be seen that most parasites that can control the consciousness of other creatures are not good things. The parasites in the fictional work Resident Evil 4 are also in a similar situation. So if this parasite also has a similar effect, then its practicality is not very high, unless Amamiya Kenichi is willing to spend time cultivating and slowly breeding, thereby selecting excellent parasites. By the way, teacher, there have been rumors in the village recently that people often go missing. Amamiya Kenichi thought of something. He put away the amber in his hand and then told his teacher. In fact, the meaning of saying this is also very simple. That is, Amamiya Kenichi wants to remind his teacher that it's almost time to prepare to run away. Although his teacher's strength is good, Amamiya Kenichi is now just a small chunin, and there is nothing interesting to do in the village. It's too boring, and he can only rely on eating melons to maintain his life every day. He also has to carefully control his desires, lest he can't help but tie others to the laboratory one day. Well, during this time, you need to accompany me to the laboratory. You can act freely at other times. Orochimaru didn't care much. Although he planned to defect, it wasn't the time yet. Amamiya Kenichi was a little helpless. It seemed that he could only be honest for the time being. However, Amamiya Kenichi could also make some preparations in advance. Before, Amamiya Kenichi had completed the special gene chain separation of Uzumaki Kushina. After the separation, Amamiya Kenichi couldn't save it, and he didn't intend to use it for experiments, so he simply froze it for preservation. However, this mission reward gave a rather peculiar thing. A blueprint. Thermobaric bomb design blueprint also marked some of the required materials. Is this asking me to learn from Deidara? Amamiya Kenichi pinched the space between his eyebrows. As soon as he thought of his blueprint, he had a headache. He still knew about thermobaric bombs. They were very lethal and could effectively target underground and hidden buildings. However, he only had a blueprint. If he wanted to completely manufacture a thermobaric bomb, it was estimated that there was still a long way to go. That's not right. Speaking of which, isn't Deidara an explosion genius? Amamiya Kenichi became interested. Deidara shouldn't have been taken away by the Akatsuki yet, right? Giving me the blueprint, I think it's more reasonable. However, considering that even Naruto hasn't been born yet, the extent of Deidara's abilities is also a question. Therefore, Amamiya Kenichi temporarily extinguished the idea of finding Deidara to collect talent. Moreover, if we're talking about collecting talent, Amamiya Kenichi thought of a child he had inadvertently seen before, who seemed to be working for Danzo and looked somewhat like Kabuto. Amamiya Kenichi shook his head. Even if it really was Kabuto, the other party had already been noticed by Danzo. It was estimated that he wouldn't be able to get him over in a short period of time, so he could only take it one step at a time. How are the experimental records? Orochimaru's voice interrupted Amamiya Kenichi's thoughts. He quickly handed the experimental record book in his hand to Orochimaru. After the teacher finished reading it and nodded in satisfaction, Amamiya Kenichi finally breathed a sigh of relief, and then followed his teacher out of the experimental base. The current Konoha ninja village is relatively peaceful. The strength of the fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato, had already been demonstrated in the previous war, coupled with Hiruzen Sarutobi, who hadn't yet become old and frail. It can be said that the current Konoha ninja village maintains a relatively strong combat power. Even the Raikage of Kumogakure hasn't shown any ill intentions towards Konoha. But being targeted by Obito seems even worse, right? Amamiya Kenichi touched his chin. That's why these easily agitated young people are the most troublesome. If Obito was willing to communicate and understand in private, perhaps the plot in the Naruto world would be different. And thinking of Obito's eyes with Kamui, Amamiya Kenichi felt a little envious. That was Kamui, a very powerful eye technique, but the most important thing was that it was very convenient. The area of the Kamui space doesn't seem small. If he could obtain Kamui, wouldn't he be able to build a completely independent laboratory that belonged to him? And it would be very safe. Unfortunately, the Sharingan's eye techniques are born according to the strongest desires when the Uchiha clan is stimulated, so they can't be precisely controlled. And frankly speaking, Amamiya Kenichi wasn't so sure about whether he could awaken the Mangekyu. Obito's eyes are Mangekyu, and they possess Kamui, while Kakashi's eyes are also Kamui. Theoretically, studying the effects of the two people's eyes should be the same. Amamiya Kenichi casually bought 2 skewers of tricolor dango and took a bite. The taste of the tricolor dango was pretty good. However, just as he was about to eat another skewer, Amamiya Kenichi felt a strong gaze. He couldn't help but turn his head to look. Ninjas are quite sensitive to gazes. And with this look, Amamiya Kenichi saw a little kid staring eagerly at the tricolor dango in his hand. A little kid from the Uchiha clan. The symbol on their clothes is very distinctive. Want some? Amamiya Kenichi looked at the Uchiha kid in front of him and asked. There were quite a few little ninjas these days. The other party looked very well behaved. He didn't know who they came out with. The other party nodded subconsciously, but then quickly shook his head, making Amamiya Kenichi not know whether to laugh or cry. So, did he want to eat it or not? However, Amamiya Kenichi still handed over the tricolor dango in his hand. After hesitating for a while, the other party still took it and said a shy thank you. Itachi, why did you run to this place? An anxious voice followed, and then an Uchiha ninja jumped to the little boy's side, while also glancing at Amamiya Kenichi. Amamiya Kenichi still had that teasing expression, but his heart was a little surprised. The child in front of him was actually Uchiha Itachi, the man who led the Uchiha clan massacre night, and also the person Sasuke hated for a long time. However, although Uchiha Itachi's strength will be very strong in the future, he is still a kid now. What made Amamiya Kenichi pay more attention was the Uchiha in front of him. Uchiha Shisui, a genius ninja, but in Amamiya Kenichi's opinion, the most powerful thing about Uchiha Shisui was still his Mangekyu Sharingan. Koto Amatsukami, this genjutsu was too outrageous. If the cooldown time of this thing was very short, it was estimated that Uchiha Shisui could truly achieve peace in the ninja world. I saw him staring at the tricolor dango in my hand, so I gave him one. Amamiya Kenichi explained with a smile. Although he knew that the man in front of him was Uchiha Shisui, Amamiya Kenichi wasn't very worried. The other party couldn't use Koto Amatsukami on him, even if the other party suddenly had a brain cramp. Moreover, the other party didn't seem very old, and whether he had awakened the Mangekyu was still a question. Thank you. Uchiha Shisui was very polite, but he didn't let down his guard. After taking Itachi away, he used his own method to check it, and he was relieved after confirming that there was no poison. Amamiya Kenichi didn't have any thoughts about the encounter with Uchiha Shisui and Itachi. After all, Konoha was very peaceful now, and after the fourth Hokage took office, the Uchiha clan's life was a little easier. Although Namikaze Minato was also somewhat wary of the Uchiha clan, it hadn't reached the point where Danzo wanted to get rid of them quickly. It was a pity about Shisui. This powerful genjutsu, Koto Amatsukami, should have been used on Danzo. He didn't even need Danzo to be loyal to the Uchiha clan immediately, even if it was just to make Danzo's attitude towards the Uchiha clan friendly. At that time, the Uchiha clan wouldn't have been forced to the point of rebellion, and they wouldn't have been isolated by the entire village and then eventually destroyed. Koto Amatsukami, tisk tisk, I really want it. Amamiya Kenichi licked his lips. Koto Amatsukami was too strong, it was a strategic level weapon. If used well, it could even change the situation of the entire world. Amamiya Kenichi shook his head. These ideas were still too outrageous. What Amamiya Kenichi had to do now was to slowly develop, then dominate the ninja world, and finally take down the Otsutsuki clan. Researching these guys' spaceship technology and other technologies would allow the entire ninja world to undergo a huge transformation. If everything went smoothly, there would be no need for Naruto's son to work hard to become combustible material. Amamiya Kenichi himself could make the Otsutsuki clan the fuel of the ninja world. Of course, he still had to take things one step at a time. After eating dinner and stopping by the bookstore to see if Ika Ika Paradise had been released, Amamiya Kenichi went to find his teacher. He wanted to try using Impure World Reincarnation to summon the first Hokage. It would definitely be best to have his teacher backing him up. Once he confirmed that he could undo the Impure World Reincarnation of the first Hokage at any time, then he could start his learning plan. It was blocked before, I don't know why. Oh, you want to start researching the Impure World Reincarnation? Orochimaru took a sip of tea, then looked at his disciple with amusement, asking a question. Yes, teacher, I think the Impure World Reincarnation has strong practical applications. Amamiya Kenichi said honestly. He indeed wanted to research the Impure World Reincarnation in order to extract something more suitable for himself from the first Hokage. Although Amamiya Kenichi's strength had improved by leaps and bounds after obtaining the first Hokage's sage body, he didn't inherit the wood release ability for some reason. Therefore, Amamiya Kenichi wanted to start with the first Hokage's sage body. Based on the first Hokage's talent for sage arts, once he mastered sage arts, his strength would improve dramatically. I don't really recommend you use the Impure World Reincarnation right now, because this forbidden technique is still being improved. If you want to try it, you can reincarnate some ninjas who aren't very strong. Orochimaru shook his head. This disciple of his was really impatient, always feeling like he didn't have enough time, wanting to dip his toes into everything. Moreover, summoning the first Hokage now would have a very high chance of causing problems. If even a trace of suspicion were left behind, it would be troublesome. Hearing this, Amamiya Kenichi understood his teacher's concerns. After all, Amamiya Kenichi had some understanding of his teacher's thoughts. Speaking of which, how is that research you were promoting yourself going? Orochimaru asked with interest. He had previously reviewed his disciple's experimental records, and that research was indeed very interesting. Although, in his opinion, it also had great limitations. It's going very well, teacher. A few more experiments should lead to a breakthrough. Mentioning his experiment, Amamiya Kenichi revealed a hint of a smile. During this period, Amamiya Kenichi hadn't pushed forward many research projects. One aspect was the daily research on the first Hokage's cells and Sharingan with his teacher, Orochimaru. This aspect was currently being carried out continuously due to the cooperation with Danzo, with Root providing a large amount of funding and experimental materials. However, Amamiya Kenichi was more focused on his own research, which was to perfect the ninjutsu he created, the ninjutsu of imparting cancer. Currently, the progress was quite satisfactory to Amamiya Kenichi. Amamiya Kenichi could now create cancer in the opponent's lungs by spraying nicotine on their skin. After casting the technique, Amamiya Kenichi could already form late-stage lung cancer in the lungs of a genin. The disadvantage was that it took a long time and still required spraying nicotine, so it still needed improvement. I see that your experiment greatly affects the target's combat power, but is your research useful for Chunin and Jonin? Orochimaru was quite concerned about his disciple's research. After all, this disciple had already taken a lot of research funds from him, and even 5 genin-level materials had been taken away. If he hadn't seen that his disciple did have research results, he would have wanted his disciple to give up this path. Because there are no Chunin and Jonin-level materials yet, it's temporarily impossible to determine. Amamiya Kenichi shook his head. He was indeed envious of Chunin, but he had never obtained one. After all, it wasn't a time of war now, and materials weren't so easy to find. The human body structure is roughly the same, so it should work. Orochimaru was very optimistic about his disciple's research. This thing seemed useless, but those cells called cancer cells had magical properties. Perhaps by studying them, one could try to deduce a method to make the body immortal. However, Orochimaru hadn't completely pinned his hopes for immortality on the research of cancer cells. His impure world reincarnation research was also ongoing. It was just that ninjutsu seemed to cause some damage to the soul. Although it was likely that one could recover through rest after reincarnation, Orochimaru couldn't be sure since he hadn't experimented yet. If cancer cells weren't similar to Hashirama cells, Orochimaru might have tried using cancer cells to create a body for himself. Teacher, relying entirely on theoretical data and reasoning on the path of science is not feasible. Amamiya Kenichi said righteously. Orochimaru glanced at Amamiya Kenichi, then waved his hand. I can give you a Chunin level material, but you better save it for me. Orochimaru said in annoyance. This disciple was getting bolder and bolder now. He even dared to make requests of him. Thank you, teacher. Amamiya Kenichi became excited. A Chunin level material. It wasn't that he couldn't beat one now, but turning a ninja into a material was very troublesome. Amamiya Kenichi couldn't possibly run to the village and kidnap a Chunin, right? Although Amamiya Kenichi had indeed thought about it, after all, he really wanted to see what the difference was between a Chunin and a genin facing this ninjutsu. But considering the risk of exposure, he behaved himself. However, Amamiya Kenichi had already thought about it. The Nine Tails Rebellion would be a good time to harvest materials. Teacher, do you want to watch the experiment? Amamiya Kenichi looked at Orochimaru beside him with a strange expression. Usually, his teacher basically didn't pay attention to his research. He didn't know what was wrong with his teacher today, suddenly starting to pay attention to this issue. Yeah, I don't have anything to do today. Orochimaru was still very calm. Besides doing research, Orochimaru rarely spoke most of the time. Amamiya Kenichi didn't have any objections, but followed his teacher to collect the material, and then brought the material to his laboratory. Teacher, please disinfect first. Amamiya Kenichi said politely. Although cancer cells wreaked havoc in the body, they were essentially weaker than external bacteria and viruses. Therefore, a sterile room was very important. Amamiya Kenichi had also spent some effort to transform his laboratory into a sterile environment. Orochimaru disinfected without comment, then followed Amamiya Kenichi inside. After fixing the material in place, Amamiya Kenichi skillfully began his research. Spraying nicotine, then accurately injecting the refined yang attribute chakra into the lungs, and then lung cancer cells appeared. Amamiya Kenichi was very satisfied. He had been busy researching how to accurately affect cancer cells with yang attribute chakra during this period, and now he had achieved some results. I have read everyone's comments, but the protagonist does not mess around everywhere. Kimimaro does have this idea, but it is currently just digging a hole and does not intend to go over to study it. Deidara is just a temporary thought of the protagonist. After all, Deidara is probably only born for a short time now. While the massive influx of yang attribute chakra could previously cause respiratory alkalosis, that was too obvious, and the success rate was very low and not concealed. Now, after Rain Palace Kenichi's improvement, he can diffuse yang attribute chakra into the air around him, allowing it to continuously worsen others' cancer as they breathe. So, theoretically, Rain Palace Kenichi feels that his ninjutsu has the potential to develop into a range-based killing ninjutsu. It's just that there is no need for it now. He just wants to explore the impact of cancer on Chunin. Teacher, look here, the lungs of this test subject have begun to show early signs of lung cancer. Rain Palace Kenichi said excitedly to Orochimaru. As expected, it was similar to what he thought. Even Chunin are still human. As long as you are human, as long as you still need to use your lungs to breathe, then you cannot escape the effects of lung cancer. Maybe the early stages of cancer don't affect combat effectiveness much, but what about the later stages? What about the terminal stage? Rain Palace Kenichi once went to the oncology department of the hospital to visit his relatives. Cancer patients in the late to terminal stages are very pitiful. Their bodies can hardly support movement, and lying down is also a kind of torture. Intense pain constantly torments them. As long as his experiment can succeed, then the opponent's ninja's physical fitness will deteriorate, and even as the time spent with him increases, the situation will become even worse. I see in your experimental report that the fine extraction technique has no effect on this disease. Orochimaru also noticed the difference in this Chunin. He looked at the other party's normal lungs and asked curiously. Yes, teacher, after all, cancer cells are essentially normal cells produced by their own bodies, and cannot be judged as foreign harmful components. Rain Palace Kenichi nodded. He had previously asked those medical teams to try to cure those cancer patients, but so far none have succeeded. Only early-stage cancers have a certain cure rate, and mid-stage depends on physical fitness. And there has not been a single successful case of curing late-stage cancer, let alone terminal stage. Of course, it may also be because the current ninja world's research on cancer is not very in-depth. Continue. I want to see the late stage you mentioned. Orochimaru urged. He was a little impatient. This performance is indeed very similar to Hashirama Cell's. Rain Palace Kenichi nodded, but if it reaches the late stage, it is estimated that this guy will be dying soon, and there will be no way to save him at that time. Soon, as Rain Palace Kenichi continued to infuse yang attribute chakra into the lung cancer cells, some abnormal lines slowly appeared in the lungs of this chunin, and even eventually formed a white irregular depression on the surface of the lungs. This is the occupancy performance of lung cancer cells, which can be observed with the naked eye, which can prove that the lung cancer cells are very large. It takes a long time, Kenichi, you need to improve this. Orochimaru shook his head, then nodded again. The time it took was too long. It took so long to continuously infuse yang attribute chakra to have this effect. How could the battlefield give you so much time to continuously infuse chakra? It seems that the limitations of this ninjutsu are still very large, but it is a good choice for assassination. For example, his teacher, Sarutobi Hiruzen, who especially likes to smoke. I know, teacher. Rain Palace Kenichi scratched his head. The development of this ninjutsu is indeed a bit difficult at present, but as long as it is broken through, the future achievements will not be small. It's just that lung cancer cells can be stimulated to produce through nicotine, so what about cancer cells in other body tissues? It's impossible for me to find them one by one, right? That's too much trouble. And for this problem, Rain Palace Kenichi also has an idea in his mind. In his previous life, when radiation was first discovered, it was regarded as a divine object, and there were even cosmetics made of radium elements. Of course, later people realized that radiation can cause cancer, and people avoid radiation. So Rain Palace Kenichi's idea is to find those radiation elements from his previous life in the ninja world. If he can create nuclear radiation. After Orochimaru understood the current experimental progress, he left. Before leaving, he asked Rain Palace Kenichi to record the time this chunin could survive, and also record the symptoms. Rain Palace Kenichi didn't care. Even if his teacher didn't say it, he was going to do it anyway. After all, this is a rare chunin consumable. After finishing the research, Rain Palace Kenichi went to eat ramen. This time, Rain Palace Kenichi went to Ichiraku Ramen. Ichiraku Ramen has been open in Konoha for many years and has witnessed the growth of many ninjas. When Nohara Rin was still alive, she used to come here with Obito and the others to eat ramen. Rain Palace Kenichi occasionally comes here to eat ramen, because the ramen here is indeed delicious, but the price is a bit more expensive than the one he usually goes to. Rain Palace Kenichi even thinks that the previous ramen shop was cheaper because the taste was not as good as Ichiraku Ramen. Just after sitting down, Rain Palace Kenichi noticed that a ninja was sitting 2 seats away from him. His very conspicuous hair made him instantly know who it was. Kakashi. Rain Palace Kenichi glanced at Kakashi. Kakashi was still the same, but now he often appears and disappears mysteriously. Rain Palace Kenichi thinks he probably joined the Anbu. The 4th Hokage, Namikaze Minato, hopes to help Kakashi recover through the busy tasks of the Anbu. Judging from the results later, it should still have some effect. Kamui. Rain Palace Kenichi smacked his lips. The more Rain Palace Kenichi thought about it, the more he felt that this eye technique was very suitable for him, but now Kamui is on 2 people. Kakashi is easy to approach, but Obito is not. What's more, Kamui with 2 eyes is the complete version, and the space is the same. Thinking about it this way, when Obito was in the Kamui space, he probably was attacked by Kakashi's explosive tags and kunai, right? Thinking about it this way, Obito seems quite pitiful, and he really loves Kakashi. He doesn't even take his eyeballs back. Kakashi was expressionless, and Rain Palace Kenichi didn't want to put a hot face on a cold ass, so he honestly ate his noodles. After he finished eating, Kakashi had already left. Rain Palace Kenichi didn't care, but instead picked his teeth with a toothpick and slowly walked towards his home. Senior Rain Palace. However, just after taking a few steps, Rain Palace Kenichi heard a voice that gave him a headache. Enko Mitarashi is here again. Why aren't you going back to rest so late? Amamiya Kenichi looked helplessly at the little tagalong behind him. Why did this little guy like to stick to him so much? Senior brother, the teacher hasn't paid attention to me lately. Is he angry with me? Mitarashi Idzuki lowered her head, fiddling with her fingers, looking dejected. Amamiya Kenichi scratched his head. He knew what his teacher meant. After all, the teacher had said that Mitarashi Idzuki was not suitable to leave Konoha village with them. So the teacher actually had other arrangements for this junior sister of his, which was to make his junior sister forget about the teacher, so that the junior sister could live well in Konoha village. However, although Amamiya Kenichi knew this, it was impossible for him to tell his junior sister, so he could only say something else. Of course not, it's just that the teacher has been very busy lately. I rarely see the teacher. Amamiya Kenichi smiled and rubbed Mitarashi Idzuki's head. This little girl was quite sensitive. Can't even senior brother see him? Mitarashi Idzuki showed a surprised expression. Amamiya Kenichi nodded. If you want to comfort others, the best way is to empathize first, let the other person know that you are the same as her, so that the effect of comforting will be better. This was Amamiya Kenichi's experience from his previous life. The teacher is so busy. Before, the village was rumored that the teacher could become the fourth Hokage. Mitarashi Idzuki looked a little more relaxed, and began to talk about other things. Amamiya Kenichi listened quietly, and bought 2 skewers of tricolor dumplings by the way, handing 1 skewer to Mitarashi Idzuki. Looking at the tricolor dumplings in his hand, Amamiya Kenichi thought of Itachi and Shisui. It had to be said that the Uchiha family produced quite a few geniuses. The kaleidoscope Sharingan was really powerful. At least that was the case in the ninja world at the moment. In the later stages, the kaleidoscope Sharingan was also a very important combat force. By the way, senior brother. Mitarashi Idzuki suddenly thought of something and quickly tugged on Amamiya Kenichi's sleeve. What's wrong? Amamiya Kenichi looked at his junior sister in confusion and asked. The ninjutsu that the teacher taught me before, I don't quite understand. Can senior brother teach me? Mitarashi Idzuki looked at Amamiya Kenichi expectantly and asked. Amamiya Kenichi scratched his head and didn't refuse. Anyway, the teacher had been telling him to act carefully during this period of time. Teaching his junior sister ninjutsu was a good way to disguise himself. So Amamiya Kenichi took Mitarashi Idzuki to the training ground to train. During this period of time, Amamiya Kenichi, whose strength had grown rapidly, found it easier to teach his junior sister. However, this training session ended quickly, and the reason was because of the lightning and deafening thunder in the sky. It's thundering, Amamiya Kenichi said thoughtfully. Speaking of which, he remembered that Sasuke had created a ninjutsu in the future, lightning release, Kirin, which was a very powerful ninjutsu, but it seemed that he needed to use Sharingan to see the direction of the lightning. It was a very difficult lightning attribute ninjutsu that used the power of nature. Amamiya Kenichi glanced at his 3-tomo Sharingan research progress. The current research progress was only 23%, which was not very slow, but he still needed to wait for a while. Without the assistance of Sharingan, Amamiya Kenichi didn't rashly try to study other ninjutsu. Instead, he sent his junior sister home before slowly returning to his home and lying on the bed. Early the next morning, Amamiya Kenichi was dragged away by his teacher as soon as he got up. Kenichi, do you know about summoning beasts? Orochimaru asked calmly. Amamiya Kenichi was stunned for a moment, then nodded. Of course he knew. The most famous summoning beast in the Naruto world should be the toad of Mount Myoboku. After all, it was the summoning beast that often appeared with the protagonist. Then there was his teacher Orochimaru's Manda, but Amamiya Kenichi was really not interested in his teacher's summoning beast. Manda's personality was really. Next were Katsuyu, Ibus, ninja dogs, and other summoning beasts, and even crow summoning beasts. There were many types. Purely in terms of strength, the 3 great holy lands were naturally better. Teacher, do you want me to contract a summoning beast? Amamiya Kenichi was a little puzzled. This thing was still very practical. Except for Raichi Cave, the conditions might be more demanding. No, what you have to do now is to concentrate on honing your ninjutsu. Orochimaru shook his head. He himself was a student who was once brought out by Hiruzen Sarutobi. He naturally knew the steps from Genin to Jonin. The strength level of Chunin can be said to be an awkward type that is neither high nor low, but it is also necessary to hone the foundation. If the foundation is well honed, then becoming a jonin in the future will be a matter of course. In the final analysis, whether it is a jonin or a chunin is just a title. The key is to look at the strength. There may even be freaks among the genin who can defeat elite jonin or even the strength of a cage after exploding. You are my disciple. If your strength is weaker than an elite jonin, I would be embarrassed to admit it. Orochimaru smiled. He had high expectations for Amamiya Kenichi. Before, he thought that this disciple of his would only be able to rely on him to survive in the future. He didn't expect that his strength had improved by leaps and bounds now, which made Orochimaru very gratified. Hehe, I will work hard. Then, teacher, what were you saying before? Amamiya Kenichi scratched his head, then couldn't help but ask. It's like this, I was wondering if summoning beasts can get cancer. Orochimaru showed a smile, with a hint of fanaticism in his eyes. Amamiya Kenichi's mouth twitched. Summoning beasts get cancer? This was really a profound question. If it were in his previous life, Amamiya Kenichi would not immediately. Animals are also animals, and it's not surprising to get cancer, but this was the world of Naruto. The physiques of those powerful summoning beasts were much stronger than ordinary ninjas. So whether they can get cancer was also a question, not to mention that if they were those summoning beasts with sage chakra, there would be even more variables. Teacher, this requires experimentation. Could it be that you want Manda to come out? Amamiya Kenichi rubbed his hands and asked expectantly. Don't mention that guy. Orochimaru's face darkened instantly. That guy Manda was getting more and more arrogant now. If it weren't for the fact that he had the white snake sage behind him. Amamiya Kenichi coughed twice. That was true. He had only seen his teacher summon Manda during the war. He would never summon him at other times. Manda's personality was indeed very bad. Teacher's summoning beast needs a checkup. Do summoning beasts also need physical examinations? Amamiya Kenichi was a little shocked. It was the first time he had heard that summoning beasts needed physical examinations. And speaking of the teacher's teacher, wouldn't that be the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi? And Hiruzen Sarutobi's summoning beast should be Enma. Amamiya Kenichi remembered that it could also transform into a weapon, which was quite practical. However, that kind of summoning beast called Enma seemed to appear very rarely. In later stages, the summoning beasts from the three great sage lands appeared the most. Why not? Sarutobi Sensei's summoning beast enjoys jonin treatment, with 2 physical examinations every year. Orochimaru chuckled. A summoning beast enjoying jonin treatment, when it comes to making money, you really live up to your reputation. Sarutobi Sensei. Amamiya Kenichi's mouth twitched. Frankly, he really hadn't thought that summoning beasts could enjoy jonin treatment these days. If this were his previous life, it would be a proper formal job. And it was even a formal job with a certain level. Indeed, the end of the universe is a formal job, is it? I wonder if it's too late for me to take the exam now. However, if it's the summoning beast of the former Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, then the possibility of getting cancer is quite high. Amamiya Kenichi touched his chin. Oh, didn't you say that smoking is currently the most likely cause of lung cancer? Orochimaru looked at his disciple with interest. In the face of this newly emerging disease, his understanding was not as deep as his disciples. Orochimaru even felt that Tsunade might not understand it as much as his disciple. Yes, but if the former Hokage often smokes around others and spends a long time with them, then they are more likely to get lung cancer. Amamiya Kenichi shrugged. The harm of secondhand smoke is much greater than that of first-hand smoke. This is why some families in his previous life discovered that their children would get lung cancer. The root cause was that family members smoked around the children, leading to this problem. Otherwise, older children could be said to have learned bad habits, but younger children had no reason, right? Their parents were watching them all the time. Is there such a saying? Orochimaru became even more excited. If what his disciple said was true, then wouldn't those old geezers in the Konoha Elder Council, and Danzo, be very likely to get cancer? That would be great. Yes, because the filter of a cigarette can to some extent block some of the harmful substances, and then after those harmful substances pass through the lungs, a portion is absorbed by the body, and another portion becomes smoke. Amamiya Kenichi gestured. Quote. Then the harmful substances carried by that smoke are inhaled by others, which can also lead to cancer. There was no need to say this, it had been demonstrated many times in his previous life. This is why so many public places prohibit smoking. Although it brings inconvenience to smokers, it is also for the health of others. I discovered it when I was doing experiments. The harm of secondhand smoke was clear, but that was in his previous life. In order to make it reasonable in this world, he added a supplement. Of course, if the teacher really wanted to do experiments to prove it, Amamiya Kenichi didn't care. He had done similar experiments before, at the time to prepare for anything, but he didn't expect it to come in handy now. Orochimaru didn't care much about this issue. He remembered that Amamiya Kenichi's experimental report did mention this matter before. So Orochimaru still had some impression. What Orochimaru cared more about were those hypocritical old guys who often surrounded his teacher. His teacher liked to smoke so much, and a meeting would last so long, so it wouldn't be surprising if they got lung cancer by then, right? Although they also had regular physical examinations, there would be a period of time in between. As long as he could continuously input yang attribute chakra into them. Even if it wasn't successful, it didn't matter. Orochimaru just planned to plant a seed and then ignore it. Whether it could blossom and bear fruit by then was another matter. He had always done this, casually sowing some seeds. If they could blossom and bear fruit, then naturally that would be best. If they couldn't blossom and bear fruit, it didn't matter anyway, he wouldn't lose out. And this time, Orochimaru planned to try it out. If he succeeded, then it would be easier for him to do whatever he wanted in the future. If he didn't succeed, then it didn't matter. Let's go. We won't go to the old place today, I'll teach you a bit. Your strength is still too weak. Orochimaru's mood improved a lot, and he said to his disciple. Amamiya Kenichi's scalp tingled a little. The teacher didn't show much mercy when he attacked, often beating him black and blue, but they were all superficial injuries. According to the teacher, this was to make him remember, so that when he went out and fought with others in the future, what was left might be fatal wounds. Okay, teacher. However, Amamiya Kenichi had no objection. He knew that what his teacher said was right, his current strength was indeed very weak. Only when he became a Jonin could he be considered to have a certain combat power in the ninja world. During combat training, Amamiya Kenichi also took the opportunity to test the practicality of the ninjutsu he had developed with Orochimaru. Originally, he didn't want to do this, because if something happened to Orochimaru, wouldn't he have to take the blame? However, Orochimaru said that there was no need to worry at all, he had his own solutions, and Amamiya Kenichi was relieved to do it. I guess the teacher's impure world reincarnation should be almost developed, right? I just don't know whose body he's preparing, if it's a cute girl. Amamiya Kenichi was a little dazed. He remembered that his teacher really did use a girl's body in the future, and her looks seemed to be pretty good. What if his filial piety changed at that time? Amamiya Kenichi shook his head violently. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Look at Orochimaru-sensei now. Even if he changes his body, he's still Orochimaru-sensei, the soul doesn't change. You dare to be distracted during battle. Orochimaru's indifferent voice followed, and then Amamiya Kenichi felt like he had been stabbed hard, and a piercing pain came from his ribs. Amamiya Kenichi took a cold breath, and then he also tried to concentrate, otherwise he would have to suffer more if he was distracted again. Teacher, then please enlighten me. Amamiya Kenichi rushed over, while also using a trace of converted wind attribute chakra to blow the specially prepared nicotine spray towards Orochimaru's position. Orochimaru didn't say anything, but directly retreated to the rear, opening his mouth and spitting a great fireball technique towards Amamiya Kenichi. Amamiya Kenichi narrowed his eyes. It seemed that this ninjutsu still needed some improvement, otherwise, if the opponent didn't make close contact, it would indeed be very inefficient. The spray just now had been evaporated by the great fireball technique. Write a post-battle summary and submit it later. Orochimaru was applying medicine to Amamiya Kenichi, but his tone carried a hint of satisfaction. Amamiya Kenichi was already lying on the ground, completely unwilling to speak, only able to nod with difficulty, his entire body aching all over. Although Orochimaru wouldn't go for the kill, his hits really hurt. Amamiya Kenichi felt like he was about to be taken apart by Orochimaru. It was like his bones were being squeezed out, and he was lying on top of them. But, at least, I managed to inflict some scratches on the teacher. Amamiya Kenichi slowly climbed up, supporting himself on a tree, a smile appearing as he looked at the bloodstains on Orochimaru's arm. Before, he couldn't even cause any trouble for his teacher, but now he finally could. This was probably a kind of growth. It's just that having to write a battle summary after every sparring session with the teacher is a bit of a hassle. Kenichi, you don't need to come to the lab tomorrow, I'm giving you a day off. Orochimaru looked at his disciple with satisfaction. He had potential and was very skilled in experiments, this disciple was really making him worry less. Teacher, you. I understand. Amamiya Kenichi was stunned for a moment. It was rare to hear a break from his teacher, after all, his teacher was very focused on experiments. Amamiya Kenichi even felt that if it weren't for the consumption of physical energy, his teacher could probably stay in the lab for the rest of his life. But then Amamiya Kenichi remembered something. Tomorrow was the beginning of the month, also a busy time for Konoha Hospital. His teacher probably wanted to do something there. Yes, Orochimaru smiled. As expected, his disciple was very clever, guessing what he wanted to do. After applying the medicine to Amamiya Kenichi, Orochimaru left in a hurry, he still needed to arrange things for tomorrow. After resting for a while and relieving the pain in his body, Amamiya Kenichi slowly went back. He still had to write the battle summary, and then continue to improve his new ninjutsu. The biggest inspiration from this battle for Amamiya Kenichi was the development of ninjutsu. He now had some new ideas that he could try, so that he could improve the use of this ninjutsu as soon as possible. By the way, I don't need to go to the lab tomorrow. Amamiya Kenichi thought of what his teacher had just said to him, so what should he do tomorrow? Rest at home. This is really a bit unusual. Teacher, long time no see. The next morning, in Konoha Hospital, Orochimaru greeted Hiruzen Sarutobi with a smile. It's Orochimaru, are you here for a checkup too? Hiruzen Sarutobi, who had stepped down from the Hokage position, took a puff of smoke, then looked at his student in surprise. This was really rare. Since he supported Minato Namikaze to become the fourth Hokage, Orochimaru hadn't come to see him. Hiruzen Sarutobi wasn't surprised, he just continued to worry about the affairs of the village. As for his student, he only needed to know that the other party was still in the village, and that he seemed to have some connection with Danzo. But this student definitely had some opinions about him. So, looking at the smiling Orochimaru at this moment, Hiruzen Sarutobi's heart was a little confused, but he still silently raised his vigilance. Yes, I've been feeling unwell recently, so I wanted to come over for a checkup. Orochimaru looked at Hiruzen Sarutobi smoking, the smile in his eyes becoming even gentler. That's great, teacher, smoke a little more, smoke a little more. Well, it's not good to stay in a shady place for too long. People always need to bask in the sun. Look at me, I'm very energetic, aren't I? Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at his student meaningfully. Yes, teacher, I also want to bask in the sun, but there's no way. Big trees also need the support of roots. Orochimaru smiled. Then, the atmosphere in the hospital corridor became silent. Orochimaru and Hiruzen Sarutobi didn't speak, and beside Hiruzen Sarutobi, Enma, the Monkey King, was scratching his head, looking at his old friend in confusion. It always felt that the emotions between his old friend and his student seemed to be a little off, but it couldn't say exactly what was wrong. Hiruzen Sarutobi took a puff of smoke with some irritability. He always felt that his student Orochimaru seemed to be ill-intentioned, but he couldn't say exactly what was wrong. Teacher, smoke less, after all, you're getting old. Orochimaru went for a checkup, and before the checkup, he also persuaded his teacher, a complete and utter good student. Hiruzen Sarutobi felt uncomfortable all over. A poisonous snake showed you a smile, even if it was smiling, you would still feel scared. Hiruzen, Enma looked at his old friend worriedly. It's okay. Hiruzen Sarutobi shook his head, but then he checked his shoulder that had been patted by Orochimaru, and there was nothing abnormal. But the ominous premonition in his heart couldn't be dispelled no matter what, which made Hiruzen Sarutobi feel a little bad. I always feel warm all over. Enma coughed, then waved his hand, looking at his old friend with some disgust. He had said so many times not to smoke, but Hiruzen just couldn't restrain his desire to smoke, and every time he made his throat uncomfortable. After all, it's a hospital, and there will be some yang attribute chakra spilling out when using the mystical palm technique. Hiruzen Sarutobi didn't find it strange, but took another puff. He liked to use smoke to refresh himself when thinking about things. After thinking for a long time, he didn't find anything abnormal. Orochimaru didn't release any ninjutsu or leave a chakra mark on his shoulder. Hiruzen Sarutobi could only understand that he was thinking too much. Kenichi. When Orochimaru found Amamiya Kenichi, Amamiya Kenichi was exercising with Might Guy, which made him feel even more happy. A diligent and talented student is very satisfying for every teacher. Teacher. Amamiya Kenichi quickly twisted his waist and stood up straight. Even Might Guy, who was just doing a handstand and crawling, quickly stood up straight. This was one of the Sannin, Orochimaru. Well, want to go eat barbecue? Orochimaru looked at Amamiya Kenichi with a smile, arms crossed. As for Might Guy next to him, he also noticed him, but didn't care too much. The 8 gates had already been handed over to the village. Okay, teacher, sorry Might Guy, I have to go first. Amamiya Kenichi nodded quickly. It didn't matter whether he ate barbecue or not, the main thing was to watch the drama. After all, he was very clear about what the teacher was going to do today. That's right, this is a quit smoking novel doge face. The Akamichi barbecue restaurant wasn't very crowded at noon, and it was rare to have some peace and quiet. Teacher, is everything going well for you today? Amamiya Kenichi asked curiously, putting a slice of beef on the iron plate, which sizzled. It's alright, my relationship with the teacher is still tense, but there has been some progress. Orochimaru smiled gently, and there was nothing wrong with what he said. Amamiya Kenichi nodded thoughtfully. It seemed that what the teacher wanted to do was not very smooth, but there were some results. The 3rd Hokage will definitely know your heart, teacher. Amamiya Kenichi said with a naive look. After all, it was outside, although the 3rd Hokage had stepped down, he still had a certain influence, so it was necessary to be cautious to prevent eavesdropping. Heart. Orochimaru sighed, and then the teacher and disciple both showed joyful smiles. This heart was too heavy, and he didn't know if the 3rd Hokage could bear it. Looking at the cooked beef on the iron plate, Amamiya Kenichi quickly picked it up, or it would burn in a while. However, looking at the beef slices on the chopsticks, Amamiya Kenichi really couldn't eat it. Teacher, didn't you call Anko? Amamiya Kenichi felt a chill down his spine, that resentment was a bit too strong. I thought you called her, Kenichi. Orochimaru was still so calm, seemingly not seeing the person clinging to the door frame with only their head showing. Amamiya Kenichi twitched the corner of his mouth, but still turned his head awkwardly, and then called Mitarashi Anko at the door in. When grilling meat just now, Amamiya Kenichi felt a strong gaze, and then noticed Mitarashi Anko at the door. Speaking of which, the teacher had only ever called him to eat Akamichi's barbecue, and Mitarashi Anko hadn't come very often. Amamiya Sr. Mitarashi Anko looked at Amamiya Kenichi aggrievedly. She wondered if she was really the teacher's disciple. Clearly they were both the teacher's disciples, but the teacher was so good to Amamiya Sr., but very strict with her. Cough cough. I was just about to go to your house to call you. Amamiya Kenichi coughed awkwardly twice. Fortunately, the little girl was not very difficult to coax, and with the comfort of teacher Orochimaru and him, Mitarashi Anko quickly put down her emotions and happily started eating. For a while, the atmosphere in the barbecue restaurant became warm. Teacher, can we take a group photo together? Mitarashi Anko looked at Orochimaru with anticipation, and then stared at Amamiya Kenichi expectantly. Amamiya Kenichi scratched his head. A group photo, he didn't care. Sure, Orochimaru smiled very gently, he was in a good mood today. So when Amamiya Kenichi was about to go home, he had a photo in his hand, a group photo of him, his teacher, and Mitarashi Anko. Speaking of which, Konoha seems to have such a tradition. Amamiya Kenichi looked at the photo in his hand, a photo of 3 people. The Minato Namikaze team also had such photos, he and his teacher also had them, and Kakashi and Naruto will also have similar photos in the future. But speaking of Kakashi, Amamiya Kenichi scratched his head. Kakashi had been away for a while, and he didn't know what mission he had gone on. Asking Kakashi to teach him Chidori could only be postponed. When passing by the bento shop, Amamiya Kenichi walked in, intending to buy some bento to take home for dinner. As soon as he walked in, Amamiya Kenichi ran into 2 acquaintances. Strictly speaking, they were not acquaintances, at most he had only met them once. 2 little ghosts from the Uchiha clan, Shisui and Itachi. Obviously they also noticed Amamiya Kenichi, and Amamiya Kenichi could only nod as a greeting. Hello, thank you for taking care of Itachi last time. However, before Amamiya Kenichi could walk over, Uchiha Shisui walked over and said very politely. Clearly he was a kind person, but he suspected that the other party had ulterior motives, so this thank you was also very serious. It's okay, I think this kid is quite cute. Amamiya Kenichi smiled and waved his hand. He still kept a respectful distance from the Uchiha clan. Although the third Hokage had stepped down, Danzo was still there. However, it currently seemed that Minato Namikaze's feelings towards the Uchiha clan were neither good nor bad, at least not like the third Hokage and Danzo, who liked to suppress the Uchiha clan. Minato Namikaze's attitude towards the Uchiha clan was normal, but unfortunately Minato Namikaze wouldn't live long, otherwise the Uchiha clan's ending might be different. When the fourth Hokage died in battle and the third Hokage returned, the Uchiha clan became even more miserable, and the ending was destined. Watching Shisui leave the bento shop with Itachi, Amamiya Kenichi also scratched his head. He was wondering whether to back up Shisui and Itachi's DNA information, and then make a clone to play with. Cloning was one of teacher Orochimaru's research projects. Amamiya Kenichi was very clear about this, but the current cloning technology had not yet reached such a high level. Of course, although the probability of failure was high, it didn't matter, he could save it first. But these two guys are a bit of a problem, I can't just go up and grab their hair, can I? Amamiya Kenichi scratched his head. Shisui and Itachi were still quite vigilant. And they're not girls, otherwise maybe. Amamiya Kenichi thought thoughtfully. When collecting Kushina Uzumaki's DNA information before, he had wondered whether to rummage through the Namikaze family's trash can. After all, although Kushina Uzumaki was a Jinchuriki, she was also a girl, and a girl of a certain age would have the aunt as a relative. So in Konoha's shops, sanitary napkins were actually sold. DNA information in blood was easier to extract, but considering that this was a bit perverted, and he had other methods, Amamiya Kenichi gave up on this idea. But from this perspective, if Amamiya Kenichi wanted to, he could even collect the DNA of most people in Konoha. After buying the bento, Amamiya Kenichi returned to his home and continued to improve the development of his ninjutsu. He had bought a lot of cigarettes during this period, making the boss of the shop suspect that he had bad habits at a young age, and he had persuaded him several times, making Amamiya Kenichi not know whether to laugh or cry. Moreover, the limitations of nicotine were also very large, which forced Amamiya Kenichi to put the collection of radioactive materials on his agenda. Of course, Amamiya Kenichi also knew that this thing was really not so easy to collect, and he could only take it step by step. Fortunately, he had a lot of time. Naruto hasn't even been born yet. Recently, a strange thing happened among the high-level officials of Konoha. Orochimaru, who was at odds with the third Hokage, suddenly started to care about his teacher. This immediately caused a group of well-informed Konoha executives to look at each other, completely unable to understand what was happening. After all, the relationship between the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and his disciple Orochimaru could not be described as good. It wouldn't be far off to describe it as being as incompatible as fire and water. In short, it was all about having grudges and grievances. Especially after the fourth Hokage was chosen, everyone could see that Orochimaru had become like a stranger to his teacher, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Some clan leaders were even worried that Orochimaru, the legendary Sannin who shook the ninja world, would choose to defect from the village. It seemed that it was not impossible. After all, Orochimaru's temperament was like that. But recently, for some reason, Orochimaru suddenly started to care about his teacher, occasionally sending some cigarettes over, and they were the kind of very good tobacco. What kind of person was Hiruzen Sarutobi? Although he was no longer considered a qualified ninja in the eyes of some people, his many years of political career had also tempered him, so he was very suspicious of his disciple's sudden kindness. But no matter how he investigated, these tobaccos all had a clear origin and no problems at all. They were just very ordinary tobaccos. There was even one time when Orochimaru personally took Hiruzen Sarutobi to the store to buy them on the spot. And seemingly aware of the rumors, Orochimaru, intending to prove his innocence, often accompanied his teacher to smoke, and for a time, Hiruzen Sarutobi's house was filled with smoke. Sarutobi Bawako secretly complained about her old man for this countless times. But no matter what, Orochimaru's change was also visible to the naked eye. So, for a time, rumors about Orochimaru, reforming, and respecting teachers and valuing the Tao, gradually increased. Hiruzen Sarutobi knew as soon as he heard it whose handiwork it was, most likely that old guy Danzo. Hey, this is trying to make me look bad. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat in his seat with a displeased look, and then took another puff of his cigarette. Third Hokage, maybe Lord Orochimaru has really changed his mind. Isn't that a good thing? The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, helplessly pinched his brow and comforted the old senior with a wry smile. Minato Namikaze was a little annoyed. Although he had successfully become the fourth Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi and the elders of Konoha had no intention of retiring. They would offer advice from time to time, and occasionally come to the Hokage building to listen in. In particular, Danzo often nagged in his ear that the Uchiha clan was born with rebellious bones and would definitely be detrimental to Konoha in the future. This made Minato Namikaze feel a little dazed. He even began to wonder if the third Hokage chose him because he didn't have Orochimaru's connections and reputation, making him easier to control. But most of the time, Hiruzen Sarutobi also respected his opinions. Although he would occasionally show off his seasoned experience in handling government affairs, it made Minato Namikaze feel a little ashamed of his unfamiliarity. But all in all, it was still barely passable. Alas, Orochimaru, he might have been a very outstanding ninja. The third Hokage took another puff of his cigarette. He didn't use the tobacco sent by Orochimaru. Although Orochimaru appeared harmless and no problems could be found, he just didn't use it and sold it all off in secret. Hiruzen Sarutobi always felt that his disciple had ulterior motives, but he couldn't see what it was right now. Minato Namikaze glanced at Hiruzen Sarutobi. Might have been. Minato Namikaze felt that something was wrong. He was not an idiot after all. After being in the position of Hokage for a while, he had made some progress and could naturally hear that the third Hokage seemed to have something to say. But since the third Hokage didn't say it, he couldn't ask. By the way, fourth Hokage, your wife's due date is still a month away, right? You must pay attention to keeping it a secret during this time. Hiruzen Sarutobi's eyes became deep. He was certainly not a pure ninja anymore, but he was still the former Hokage of Konoha village, and he could dedicate everything for the village. The nine-tailed Jinchuriki cannot be lost. If something happens to the nine tails, then Konoha will lose at least a piece of flesh, and even its vitality may be greatly damaged. I know, please trouble the third Hokage to take care of it for me at that time. Minato Namikaze also became serious when he mentioned his wife. I know, Hiruzen Sarutobi nodded and took another puff of his cigarette. Kushina is Konoha's Jinchuriki, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, but Minato Namikaze didn't know how many times he had hoped that his wife was not a Jinchuriki when he was sleeping during this time. The Jinchuriki is one of the pillars of a village, and the Jinchuriki who is about to give birth is the weakest of the weak, and can be said to have a low level of defense. If someone were to attack the Jinchuriki at this time, the consequences would be unimaginable. But Minato Namikaze was even more worried about the safety of his wife's life. If Kushina and his unborn child had problems at that time, wouldn't that be? Minato Namikaze shook his head violently. This possibility was unlikely. Even Danzo, the Konoha elder who often opposed him, knew the importance of the Jinchuriki. Kushina would definitely be fine. Teacher, everything has been normal in the village recently. Amamiya Kenichi was extracting to help his teacher, while the experimental subject lying in front of him had already started to turn pale. The first Hokage's cells passed the rejection test on the other person's body, but problems still occurred after the official transplant. The other person was about to die. Orochimaru wiped his hands. He stopped. This consumable was definitely going to die. This was his experience. He had gained experience from doing experiments. It was conceivable how eager Danzo was for the first Hokage's cells. Orochimaru felt that Danzo probably wanted to master the first Hokage's wood release ability. Wood release had a very high reputation in Konoha village, which was why the previous successful experimental subject was taken away by Danzo for careful cultivation. Amamiya Kenichi glanced at his teacher. His teacher had been smoking a lot recently. He could feel that some cancer cells had already appeared in his teacher's lungs, but they were quickly eliminated. Amamiya Kenichi didn't have any thoughts of attacking his teacher. After all, he knew very well that even if his teacher was really tricked by him into the terminal stage, he could still change bodies with the impure world reincarnation. What's more, he was getting along well with his teacher now. The more normal it is, the more abnormal it is. Counting the days, it's almost time. Orochimaru smiled. Chapter 31. It's almost here. Amamiya Kenichi smacked his lips. This, almost, definitely wasn't referring to anything else, but rather the night of the nine-tailed fox's rampage. If we were to say what caused Minato Namikaze's short life, then, in reality, there are many factors, such as his skin not being as thick as the third Hokage's, encountering a disciple who lost his mind due to a scheme, and it was a corrupted version at that. As everyone knows, corruption increases strength severalfold. Obito, who wasn't considered strong in Minato Namikaze's team, became overpowered after being corrupted. The Mangekyo Sharingan successfully allowed the nine-tailed fox to break free. Amamiya Kenichi remembered that it seemed Obito saw Nohara Rin die at the hands of his good friend Kakashi, and then he successfully turned to the dark side. The intense emotional shock allowed him to directly advance to the Mangekyo Sharingan. It seems like that's how it was. Anyway, that's what the Naruto explanation Amamiya Kenichi watched said. But it must be admitted that the appearance of the nine-tailed fox was also the last straw that broke Minato Namikaze's back. If the nine-tailed fox had been restrained and returned, perhaps Minato Namikaze wouldn't have died, and Konoha would have taken a different path. Minato Namikaze had cage-level strength, and the third Hokage also had cage-level strength. Even though Danzo was the scum of the ninja world, he still had strength. Facing this lineup, the Hidden Cloud Village probably wouldn't dare to cause trouble casually. Moreover, Minato Namikaze wasn't like the third Hokage, who always valued harmony above all else, tolerating and yielding in everything. Other ninja villages would need to consider the consequences before causing trouble. Alright, today's experiment is over. Remember to write the lab report later. Orochimaru wiped his hands. He currently doesn't have much desire to research the first Hokage's cells. If it weren't for the collaboration with Root, Orochimaru wouldn't have wanted to take on this matter. Moreover, his disciple has given him a new research direction recently. Okay, teacher. Amamiya Kenichi didn't have any objections. This is an underground laboratory established in cooperation with Root. There are many eyes and ears, making it unsuitable for doing his own things. Once he officially leaves the village, Amamiya Kenichi can then focus on scientific research. However, although there is secret funding from Root, it's still not enough. Amamiya Kenichi also has his own plans. He thinks the Akatsuki is a good choice. Nagato's Rinnegan, the demonic statue of the outer path, and those who joined the Akatsuki, which of them doesn't have research value? There is no need to worry about funding either, isn't there, Kakuzu? Speaking of which, the Akatsuki is indeed a good place to go. He has research goals, research funding, and isn't Nagato always thinking about making the world feel pain and achieving peace in the ninja world? He has some small things on hand that might tempt Nagato. By then, he can take money from Conan every day to do scientific research, and also delay Black Zetsu's plan, killing several birds with one stone. It's just the Akatsuki. Amamiya Kenichi scratched his head. He hasn't even left Konoha yet, so thinking about these things for the time being is meaningless. It's better to think carefully about how to stir up some trouble on the night of the nine-tailed fox's rampage. Although he will definitely leave Konoha, it doesn't mean that Amamiya Kenichi intends to leave like this. It would be good to collect some things before leaving Konoha. For example, the nine-tailed fox's chakra, the blood of the Ino Shikacho clan, the blood of the Hyuga clan, etc. He can even try to get his teacher to take the forbidden jutsu scroll, so as to obtain some ninjutsu from it for reserve. Anyway, he will defect from the village in the end. Taking the forbidden jutsu scroll also makes him a missing nin, not taking it also makes him a missing nin, so not taking it would be foolish. Of course, Amamiya Kenichi won't really take it away. Recording some ninjutsu is enough, otherwise Konoha's pursuit will definitely be different. After leaving the experimental base, Amamiya Kenichi returned to the village's store. The nine-tailed fox's rampage is imminent. When the nine-tailed fox's rampage breaks out, he and his teacher will almost be ready to leave. Amamiya Kenichi doesn't have any attachment to Konoha village. The only thing he cares about is the food here. Tricolor dango and Ichiraku ramen are very good. It's a pity that he won't be able to come back for a long time after leaving. So he plans to have a good meal during this time, which can be regarded as rewarding himself for his hard work. Kakashi. As soon as Amamiya Kenichi walked into Ichiraku ramen, he saw Kakashi with his silver hair. He was wearing a very ordinary outfit today, so he probably wasn't on a mission. Amamiya Kenichi felt a little surprised, but after thinking about it carefully, he didn't find it strange. The Jinchuriki's delivery period is coming, which is definitely a major event in Konoha. The Anbu and Root ninjas sent out, as well as the Jonin, except for those who really couldn't be contacted or whose missions were at a critical moment. Basically all those who could be withdrawn have been withdrawn. The fourth Hokage is really careful, but it's a pity. Amamiya Kenichi smacked his lips, then ordered a bowl of tonkatsu ramen and sat down. Kakashi still had that lifeless look. Amamiya Kenichi knew at a glance that there was no point in going up to talk to him, so he simply didn't bother to offer a warm face to a cold reception. However, what Amamiya Kenichi didn't expect was that Kakashi took the initiative to come over and sit next to him. Amamiya Kenichi glanced at Kakashi in surprise. Kakashi was lifeless and didn't seem to want to talk, which made Amamiya Kenichi even more confused. What followed was a long silence, until Kakashi's ramen was served, and then he spoke. Teacher told me to make more friends. Kakashi suddenly said this, and the corner of Amamiya Kenichi's mouth twitched. So you silently sat next to me just to make friends? Is this how you make friends? If you put it outside, you would be called a madman by others. Aren't we friends? We already were before. Amamiya Kenichi showed a hint of just the right uprightness. This is what he learned when he was with Guy. Guy is the kind of person who is difficult for people to be wary of, because his thoughts are all on his face, and he will directly say what he wants to do. To put it nicely, he treats people with sincerity, with the heart of a child. To put it badly, forget it. Amamiya Kenichi thinks it's quite easy to be friends with Guy, and there aren't so many calculations, it's just pure friendship. He doesn't want to say anything about his friend. Anyway, that's how Guy is now. Amamiya Kenichi thinks his expression is useful sometimes, so he learned it. He didn't expect it to come in handy now. Kakashi was stunned when he heard this. His lifeless eyes inadvertently glanced at Amamiya Kenichi, and then he saw that upright expression. He was almost giving him a thumbs up and showing a bright smile. Yeah, Kakashi glanced at Amamiya Kenichi. He thought this disciple of Orochimaru was very similar to Guy. No wonder they could play together. Your house is quite big. Amamiya Kenichi looked at Kakashi sitting across from him, feeling a bit overwhelmed. How exactly did things develop to this point? Just now, Amamiya Kenichi was still eating ramen with Kakashi at Ichiraku Ramen, but after finishing, he ended up at Kakashi's house. It's just me here. Kakashi's expression was still not good, but he still poured a cup of tea for Amamiya Kenichi. Your eye must be a big burden on you, right? Amamiya Kenichi picked up the teacup, took a sip, and found the taste decent, though not particularly good. At least there was no strange taste. Amamiya Kenichi had heard that some people in certain places like to add strange things to their tea. Kakashi subconsciously touched his eye. This eye was given to him by his close friend Obito, a very powerful eye. When he first returned to Konoha, Kakashi was troubled by the Uchiha clan. If his teacher hadn't stepped in to protect him, it would have been difficult to resolve the situation peacefully. Yeah, mentioning the burden of his eye, Kakashi felt a bit of a headache. Although the Sharingan is indeed a very powerful eye, the problem is that it consumes a lot of chakra. Kakashi is now having a large amount of chakra drained by the Sharingan every day, which he is not used to. Amamiya Kenichi stroked his chin. He almost blurted out, "Give me your eye." After all, this is the Mangekyo Sharingan. Amamiya Kenichi really wanted to study the differences between this eye and the ordinary 3-tomo Sharingan and 2-tomo Sharingan. You should know that the Mangekyo Sharingan is a very magical eye. Using the attached dojutsu consumes the eye, eventually leading to blindness. And to solve this problem, you need to evolve the Mangekyo Sharingan into the Eternal Mangekyo, which can solve the consumption of dojutsu power and allow for further advancement. But why does using unique dojutsu with the Mangekyo Sharingan cause the eye to gradually go blind? What exactly is the difference between the Eternal Mangekyo and the ordinary Mangekyo? Are the patterns of the Mangekyo Sharingan's pupils generated randomly, or are there fixed rules? If the pupil pattern is changed to Shisui's, is it possible to master Kotoamatsukami? I'm very curious. Amamiya Kenichi licked his lips with some excitement. There are not many Mangekyo Sharingan users in the ninja world. Currently, Amamiya Kenichi only knows about Kakashi and Obito, and then possibly Shisui and Itachi in the future. Amamiya Kenichi is not very clear whether Uchiha Fugaku, the head of the Uchiha clan, has the Mangekyo. But in terms of ease of acquisition, Kakashi's eye is definitely the easiest choice. However, he also knew that he couldn't be too obvious at this time. Kakashi, it's a little embarrassing to say, but Amamiya Kenichi blushed appropriately and asked the question softly. Kakashi was stunned for a moment after hearing this, but he didn't think too much about it. After all, the fact that he developed Chidori was not a secret to the higher-ups in Konoha. This ninjutsu is very simple. If you want to learn it, I can teach you. Kakashi was silent for a while, and finally decided to teach Amamiya Kenichi. After all, his teacher would occasionally ask him if he was making friends seriously, and his teacher's wife would also ask. Then thank you, Kakashi. Amamiya Kenichi looked at Kakashi with a smile, and his eyes inadvertently glanced at Kakashi's Sharingan. Mangekyo Sharingan, this must be obtained. It will take some time for Shisui and Itachi to awaken their eyes. Obito is too strong to fight for now, Kakashi is the only choice. I always feel a little embarrassed. Amamiya Kenichi dragged his tired body and lay on the small bed at home. Learning Chidori is not very difficult. Amamiya Kenichi felt that he could master this ninjutsu quickly, but it would take some time. But how to seize Kakashi's Mangekyo Sharingan on the night of the nine-tailed fox's attack made Amamiya Kenichi a little headache. First of all, Kakashi's current strength is still very good. He can become a Jonin at a young age, and his talent is much stronger than his own, who has not obtained the first Hokage's sage body. Secondly, although the Sharingan has caused a certain burden on Kakashi, it has also improved his strength, which is undeniable. Maybe I can deplete his chakra reserves. Kakashi's current chakra reserves are definitely not as large as they will be later. Amamiya Kenichi stroked his chin. He thought this idea was good. Moreover, his current strength has also improved a lot. If he really fights Kakashi, he is not without a chance of winning. The only problem is that he still hasn't mastered Sage Mode. This made Amamiya Kenichi even more looking forward to his first meeting with the first Hokage, but he also needed to be prepared for the possibility that the first Hokage would not teach him. At that time, the only solution would probably be to go through his teacher and then go to Raichi Cave to learn sage techniques. Of course, it is not impossible to try to develop it himself, but the problem of petrification if natural energy is not handled properly after absorption makes Amamiya Kenichi a little cautious. Then it's settled. When the time comes, I can study the difference between the three Tomo Sharingan and the Mangekyo. The eternal Mangekyo is still too early. Amamiya Kenichi stretched lazily. His current research progress is good, so he has prepared a 3 Tomo Sharingan himself. This is also why he plans to take Kakashi's Sharingan. Although Kakashi's eyes look like ordinary 3 Tomo Sharingan now, Amamiya Kenichi knows that Kakashi's eyes have already evolved into Mangekyo. It's just that Kakashi doesn't know how to activate it, so he doesn't know about this. So although he feels a little sorry for Kakashi, Amamiya Kenichi feels that without the Sharingan, Kakashi can probably embark on his own unique path. After all, Kakashi is a genius. The only trouble is Obito. That guy Obito, if he finds out that Kakashi's Sharingan is gone, there will definitely be some trouble. Thinking of Obito, Amamiya Kenichi felt a headache. Obito's eyes are different in his hands than in Kakashi's. In Kakashi's hands, Obito will probably continue to follow the plot, but putting it on a stranger like himself. He really can't be sure what Obito will do. Amamiya Kenichi shook his head. The nine-tailed fox's attack is imminent, and he also needs to start preparing his plan for the day of the nine-tailed fox's attack. If the plan goes smoothly, then he will be able to take away some of the funds, research materials, and also the Mangekyo Sharingan. It can be said to be a great harvest. Go for it, big brother who is a two-faced person. I'm just waiting for you to make trouble. Time passed day by day, and Amamiya Kenichi continued to maintain a good relationship with Kakashi, and he had successfully mastered Chidori. Kakashi, facing Amamiya Kenichi who deliberately wanted to maintain a good relationship with him, also became slightly less gloomy. Everything was going so smoothly, all that was left was for Obito to come and make trouble, and then release the nine tails to attract the village's attention. However, just as Amamiya Kenichi was busy preparing to face the upcoming disaster, Orochimaru sensei dragged him into the laboratory. Teacher, can I have these consumables? Amamiya Kenichi originally intended to ask Orochimaru what he was planning to do, but as soon as he arrived at the laboratory, Amamiya Kenichi became excited. 4 Konoha ninjas, and it seemed to be a Jonin plus his ninja squad combination. These were rare consumables. Although Jonin seemed a bit useless in the later stages, essentially, Jonin were a very important pillar of combat power in a village, and were very important. And in all of Orochimaru Sensei's research during this period, there were genin and chunin from neighboring villages, as well as villagers and genin from Konoha, but not a single jonin had been seen. So, upon seeing the still living jonin, Amamiya Kenichi became very excited. This was a jonin. No, these are very rare experimental materials. Orochimaru refused without even thinking. He still had a use for this jonin. The village's guards had increased during this period, although most people couldn't tell. Orochimaru knew, so being able to capture a ninja squad led by a jonin at this time was very rare. Then, teacher, is there something you called me for? Amamiya Kenichi felt a little bored, but he also knew his teacher's temper. He would never call him without something special. Didn't you want to see the impure world reincarnation? I'm planning to test it out now. Orochimaru glanced at his disciple. This disciple was very interested in the impure world reincarnation. He often came to him to ask questions, which made Orochimaru a little irritable. If it weren't for the fact that this disciple was still useful, Orochimaru would have lost his temper long ago. Impure world reincarnation. Amamiya Kenichi became excited again. Was he finally going to become a necromancer? Don't be so excited, observe the experiment carefully. Orochimaru's expression was very serious, and Amamiya Kenichi immediately took out paper and pen and began to record his teacher's operation. Teacher pushed in another ordinary villager, not a ninja, but the impure world reincarnation was also successful. Teacher impure world reincarnated a ninja. Quote. Wasn't I still in the Pure Land? What is this? A somewhat strange-looking man was looking at his hands in surprise. Amamiya Kenichi blinked. He really knew who this ninja was. Before the other party could notice anything wrong, a kunai was inserted into the back of his head, and instantly the man became silent. Record: Kato Dan impure world reincarnation successful. Orochimaru was very calm, but Amamiya Kenichi could see that his teacher was actually a little wary. Was he wary of the spiritualization technique? But Kato Dan wasn't even a ninja's body now. He probably couldn't exert any strength. Amamiya Kenichi nodded and continued recording, but he didn't expect that his teacher had actually retained Kato Dan's body tissue. Use the spiritualization technique to kill the ninja who is tied up. Orochimaru issued the order, but Kato Dan didn't make any movements, and the genin whose body was restrained just opened his eyes in horror. It seems that ordinary people who are not ninjas cannot allow the impure world reincarnated to exert their strength. Without the teacher saying anything, Amamiya Kenichi silently recorded this information and continued to observe. Walk, squat, dance. Orochimaru tested other commands, but these commands could be followed. It seemed that it wasn't a failure of control, but another reason, most likely because of what Amamiya Kenichi thought, the body of a civilian couldn't allow a ninja to exert his strength. So, Orochimaru unhesitatingly released the impure world reincarnation, and then tried again with a genin, and the effect this time was good. He could release some ordinary ninjutsu. The subdued jonin struggled constantly on the experimental table. His eyes widened as if his eyeballs were about to fall out. Amamiya Kenichi felt that if he could, the other party would probably pounce on him without hesitation and bite the teacher to death. After releasing the ninjutsu, the genin also died, and Orochimaru didn't intend to continue the experiment, but sat in the chair with a thoughtful expression, holding the experimental report that Amamiya Kenichi had given him and looking at it. Amamiya Kenichi didn't disturb his teacher, and looked at the jonin who was glaring at him and the teacher angrily. Amamiya Kenichi yawned. The 4-person ninja squad had 1 genin die, and there were still 3, one of whom was a female ninja, and she was trembling. Amamiya Kenichi noticed that the other party's pants were wet, and an unpleasant smell came over. The ninjas nowadays are really getting more and more timid. Orochimaru also smelled it, and he was very angry that his train of thought was disturbed, but he rarely lost his temper. Amamiya Kenichi was a little surprised. When the teacher was thinking about problems, he wouldn't speak, just to prevent the teacher from losing his temper. But he didn't expect that this female ninja wasn't reprimanded. This made Amamiya Kenichi couldn't help but take another look at this female ninja, and then he noticed that this female ninja was quite pretty. Although she hadn't fully grown up, she was already a beauty in the making. Quote. I remember that the teacher's living corpse reincarnation was a beautiful woman. Could it be this guy? A thought flashed through Amamiya Kenichi's mind. The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed, and the other party's age also matched. By the time the teacher went to carry out the Konoha crush plan in the future, it would probably be about the same age. This made Amamiya Kenichi look at this female ninja again. The other party's appearance was indeed good, pitiful, and then Amamiya Kenichi couldn't help but put the other party's inner self into his teacher. Hiss, this is terrible. Amamiya Kenichi smacked his lips. He remembered that the teacher's living corpse reincarnation only reincarnated the soul, but the body remained the same. That is to say, after reincarnation, the teacher could indeed perfectly become a woman. Moreover, Amamiya Kenichi remembered that the teacher's reincarnation target was someone who was very compatible with his soul. If his hands hadn't been sealed by the third Hokage, he might not have given up. Speaking of which, the teacher would be a girl for a period of time in the future. I wonder if the teacher will have her period. Amamiya Kenichi said thoughtfully. I suddenly have a bold idea. Amamiya Kenichi looked at the trembling female ninja, a strange smile on his face. Amamiya Kenichi knew a bit about impure world reincarnation, transferring a soul into another person's body, occupying that body, only the soul changes. But the body essentially doesn't change. So, if I could study the mysteries of the soul, and then passively change the soul through the body, what kind of teacher would ultimately be cultivated? In an instant, some strange words flashed through Amamiya Kenichi's mind. However, this idea is just an idea. The soul is too mysterious. Even now, Amamiya Kenichi hasn't done much research on it, not to mention what a joke it would be if the teacher found out. Lest he be turned into a girl as a countermeasure. After the experiment, the remaining 3 ninjas were taken away. Amamiya Kenichi didn't ask the teacher where they were being taken, but followed the teacher out. I've noticed you and Kakashi seem to have a pretty good relationship lately. Orochimaru glanced at the disciple behind him and said calmly. Yes, I've mastered the Chidori that Kakashi developed. Amamiya Kenichi answered straightforwardly. He was very interested in Kakashi's ninjutsu, and even more interested in Kakashi's Sharingan. He had already made plans that the night of the nine-tailed fox incident would be the time to take Kakashi's eyes. It's easy to take Kakashi's eyes, but how to deal with the possible repercussions is a problem. The 4th Hokage is dead, the 3rd Hokage is back, and Kakashi's eyes being gone will definitely become an issue that needs to be resolved. Unless I can subdue Kakashi in one fell swoop and make him lose consciousness, otherwise it would be hard to avoid being seen. Moreover, on the night of the nine-tailed fox incident, young genius ninjas like Kakashi, as the Leaf Village's future talent reserve, would likely be protected. So, I need to think of a way as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Amamiya Kenichi glanced at his teacher. Orochimaru's strength is very strong, and dealing with a Kakashi would definitely not be a problem. However, considering the trouble that exposing this matter to the teacher might bring, Amamiya Kenichi gave up the idea. Moreover, what his teacher would do on the night of the nine-tailed fox incident is also a question. The Hitaki family has good strength, but although the Sharingan is powerful, it is ultimately an external force. It's better to properly practice their family's swordsmanship. Orochimaru's evaluation of Kakashi wasn't very high. Although the Sharingan is indeed effective in strengthening combat power, it is not one's own power after all. Orochimaru could naturally see that in order to maintain the Sharingan, the amount of chakra in Kakashi's body was being consumed a lot. How can he become stronger like that? Kakashi values his friendship with Obito very much. Amamiya Kenichi shrugged. He had tried to persuade Kakashi before, but Kakashi was unwilling, and there was nothing he could do. Hey, friendship, Orochimaru sneered. Speaking of friendship, he thought of his former teammates, Tsunade and Jiraiya, who were known as the Sannin, but what about the relationship between them? Amamiya Kenichi was also thinking about Kakashi's matter. He had considered whether to take Kakashi's eyes before the nine-tailed fox incident, but if the nine-tailed fox incident doesn't happen, the village won't fall into chaos, and it won't be suitable for him to cause trouble. So, the nine-tailed fox incident is still the best time. At that time, the village's high-end combat power will basically be drawn away. In addition, his relationship with Kakashi is relatively close, so approaching Kakashi won't be difficult. Taking advantage of Kakashi's inattention, a sneak attack to subdue Kakashi is also possible. After all, even the powerful Uchiha Madara fell under Black Zetsu's sneak attack. Although when watching the video, Amamiya Kenichi heard many bloggers say that this was because the author didn't know how to make Uchiha Madara lose, so they created this plot kill. Of course, the simplest way is to find a way to make the teacher defect on the day of the nine-tailed fox incident, and leave the village directly. Even if the third Hokage wants to investigate, he won't have a chance. Thinking this way, Amamiya Kenichi felt it was not bad and could be listed as an alternative plan. Teacher, do we still need to deliver tobacco to Lord Third Hokage today? Amamiya Kenichi looked at his teacher with a smile and asked. Yes, of course we have to deliver it. I feel uncomfortable all over if he doesn't smoke for a day. Orochimaru also showed a smile. He doesn't have many pleasures these days, and the greatest pleasure is watching his teacher, Hiruzen Sarutobi, smoke. Every time he sees Hiruzen Sarutobi smoking, his mood becomes much more pleasant, and when he sees Danzo and the Leaf Village elders also smoking secondhand smoke next to him, he becomes even happier. Although Hiruzen Sarutobi is wary of him in every way, he is ultimately suffering from a lack of information. Orochimaru has quietly left a little something in his teacher's lungs and the lungs of several other elders. Early-stage lung cancer. This is still the result of hard work during this time. It won't work if it's too much, it will easily be noticed, but it also gives Orochimaru a kind of gaming pleasure. So, this cigarette must be delivered. Orochimaru took the tobacco and Amamiya Kenichi to the Sarutobi clan's compound. Looking at this place, what are your thoughts? Orochimaru folded his arms and looked at the Sarutobi clan's compound in front of him, and asked. Behind the vermilion gates, meat and wine go to waste, while on the roads lie the bones of those who died of cold. This was Amamiya Kenichi's biggest thought. Thinking back to those years, the Leaf Village was created by Hashirama Senju pulling Uchiha Madara together. It can be said that they made outstanding contributions, but what about now? Where is the Senju clan? The Senju clan was split up, the Uchiha clan was squeezed to the periphery of the village, and the Sarutobi clan instead occupied a very good position by relying on the third Hokage's power, and also enjoyed terrifying benefits and treatment. Yes, Orochimaru took Amamiya Kenichi and walked in. He also thought so. The teacher has fallen. He says he's doing it all for the village, but in his heart, he cares most about his Sarutobi clan. The so-called Will of Fire is just a trick to deceive people. It's like shouting a few slogans, and then brainwashing others to dedicate everything for the righteousness of the village, but did they really give what should be given? Just look at the fourth Hokage. Although he is the Hokage, he is more like a puppet, only the puppeteer is still considerate and not so blatant. Orochimaru. Hiruzen Sarutobi walked out, glanced at Orochimaru, then his gaze swept over Amamiya Kenichi next to him, and then returned to Orochimaru. Teacher, long time no see, I miss you very much. Orochimaru showed a sincere smile. Hiruzen Sarutobi took a puff of his pipe, while his wife, Bawako, poured him tea. Old man, this disciple of yours doesn't seem as bad as you say, Bawako said softly, then proceeded to clear away the cups she had just used to serve Orochimaru and his disciple. That guy, I don't believe he's that kind. Hiruzen Sarutobi flipped through the items on the table. The tobacco was of the finest quality, he could tell. Moreover, he even knew where the tobacco came from. It was bought from the old established shop in Konoha, the general store run by the Nara family. There certainly wouldn't be any problems. Then why has he been sending it all this time? It's been 7 or 8 months, hasn't it? Bawako looked at the tobacco. She could also judge its value. If Orochimaru really had bad intentions, then why would he send tobacco for 7 or 8 months? And he often reminded the old man to go to the hospital for a checkup and take care of his health. It could be said that Orochimaru has been the absolute model of a good disciple during this time. It's because I don't know that I'm so irritable, Hiruzen Sarutobi snorted, then waved his hand and left. Bawako wasn't surprised. The old man never smoked Orochimaru's tobacco. The tobacco was all sold off, which was considered an extra source of income for the family, although the large Sarutobi family didn't really value these things. Cough, cough, cough. Hiruzen Sarutobi coughed a few times. After hearing this, Bawako thought for a moment, then went to get a bag of chrysanthemum tea. He coughed a lot from smoking too much, and she was used to it. But she still had to take care of the old man. The Sarutobi clan was able to have its current status entirely because of the old man. After returning to his small home, Kenichi Amamiya began to pack his luggage. Although he didn't have much to take, he still had to take some essential items, such as the materials he had collected to make thermobaric bombs. Of course, Kenichi Amamiya didn't plan to make thermobaric bombs in Konoha. Although he already had the blueprints, he couldn't collect some of the materials, so he could only put it aside for now and make it when he had collected the materials. With thermobaric bombs, can fuel air explosives also be put on the agenda? But this research costs a lot of money. Kenichi Amamiya clicked his tongue. When the cannons fire, gold flows like water, it isn't just a saying. The manufacturing cost is very high, not to mention that Kenichi Amamiya is doing research and development, which costs even more money. This is why he hasn't started research. When he joins the Akatsuki organization and has the financial support of the Akatsuki, that will be the time for him to display his power. Kenichi Amamiya was very curious, what would a ninja army do against thermobaric bombs and fuel air explosives? But the high-end combat power of the ninja world is still very strong. Look at Madara Uchiha's Tengai Shinsei, that thing is amazing. Kenichi Amamiya licked his lips. Before he transmigrated, Kenichi Amamiya had studied why modern technology was so advanced, but it couldn't intercept meteorites entering the atmosphere. Later, he found that human technology really couldn't do this for the time being. Which country masters this technology can be said to dominate the Blue Star? What if I could master it? Star warships combined with this kind of space-based weapon, wouldn't it be easy to dominate the ninja world at that time? What's more, this world has chakra. What kind of sparks will chakra and technology collide? As soon as he thought of this, Kenichi Amamiya couldn't help but feel restless. He even wanted to try to study whether chakra could be integrated into these powerful weapons. For example, what would happen to a thermobaric bomb that incorporates chakra? It's a pity that he doesn't have the materials now, otherwise Kenichi Amamiya would do a big experiment in the center of Konoha in minutes. It can also be regarded as letting Konoha witness history. Kenichi, what are you laughing at? Kakashi looked strangely at his friend in front of him. He was eating, but Kenichi Amamiya was still laughing, and laughing very strangely. Hiss, it's okay, I thought of something happy. Kenichi Amamiya shook his head violently. Because he had been thinking about the feasibility of chakra thermobaric bombs, he didn't sleep well all night last night. He rarely had dark circles under his eyes. It seems that it is not very far from joining the ninja world's #1 group. What happy thing? Kakashi became a little interested. His time with Kenichi Amamiya had dissipated some of the dark clouds in his heart. It's nothing, Kenichi Amamiya waved his hand. What he knew were some cold jokes, and they had to be combined with the context. Saying them in Konoha would seem a little strange. However, he did see some Konoha jokes, such as the teacher's lewd photos. Kakashi curled his lips, then continued to eat his ramen. Kenichi Amamiya glanced at Kakashi. Kakashi hadn't left the village during this time, and he hadn't put on his mask. The Anbu seemed to be dormant. But it is this dormancy that makes discerning people know that something big is going to happen. Kushina Uzumaki's due date is approaching. It seems that Konoha, which seems to be calm, is about to usher in a storm. Speaking of which, Kenichi Amamiya heard that Kakashi seemed to have revealed the news about Kushina Uzumaki's due date. But those were all analyses by video bloggers in his previous life. Kenichi Amamiya himself was not very clear, but he knew that Kakashi did like to talk to himself in front of Obito and Rin Nohara's graves. It wouldn't be strange for Obito to hear it. Kakashi, do you want to come to my house to play together these few nights? Kenichi Amamiya asked casually. What to play? Kakashi paused, but still asked. He really didn't have anything to do during this time. The teacher also told him to stay in Konoha and not to go out. If he went to a friend's house to play, the teacher would definitely not have any objections. Of course no, I bought some very good-looking books, and there are also very popular games recently. Kenichi Amamiya smiled very innocently. Konoha's games are naturally not those electronic games, but paper or wooden games, similar to board games, which are quite popular. And what Kenichi Amamiya bought was the latest one on the market, and it was also very popular. Okay, Kakashi originally wanted to refuse. After all, he had to practice at night, but looking at the expectant look in his friend's eyes, he couldn't bear to refuse, so he agreed. Kenichi Amamiya looked at Kakashi and smiled even more happily. He didn't know Kushina's delivery date, but letting Kakashi stay at his house, or going to Kakashi's house himself, was a good choice. When something goes wrong, the moment Kakashi is distracted will be the moment to get the Mangekyo Sharingan. Lewd photos are not typos, everyone understands. Kenichi, you seem a bit distracted today. Kakashi glanced at his friend strangely, as Amamiya Kenichi's performance tonight was somewhat poor. He was able to go back and forth with him in the game yesterday, but today he became distracted from time to time. Sorry, Kakashi, I was just thinking about something. Amamiya Kenichi shook his head, then smiled apologetically at Kakashi. His apology was very sincere, which made Kakashi feel a little embarrassed. Looking at Kakashi in front of him, Amamiya Kenichi's expression was apologetic. The reason why he was distracted was entirely because today was a special day. Yes, as the beautiful days of peace passed day by day, the turning point of Konoha finally arrived, and this day was Kushina Uzumaki's due date. Originally, Amamiya Kenichi shouldn't have known. After all, he was just one of the many chunin in Konoha, but fortunately, his teacher hinted at him, so Amamiya Kenichi was able to know the special situation today. Naruto Uzumaki. Amamiya Kenichi smacked his lips. Today was when Naruto Uzumaki was born, the absolute protagonist in future Naruto, the child of prophecy. Although in the more distant future, there will be Boruto, a plot that was initially evaluated as non-combustible, but the current protagonist is indeed Naruto Uzumaki. And it was from this time that the plot Amamiya Kenichi knew was about to be pushed forward. But those are things for later. Now, what Amamiya Kenichi needs to solve are other problems. Kakashi, have some drink. Amamiya Kenichi smiled and brought out a bottle of drink, then opened it in front of Kakashi. Kakashi didn't mind. After all, after coming to his friend's house during this time, he found that his friend seemed to like drinking drinks very much, and he had to drink a bottle every night. Kakashi glanced outside. The sky was not completely dark today, but it was almost time, and he would almost leave for the Anbu later. If it weren't for the teacher knowing that his relationship with Amamiya Kenichi was good during this time, and specially gave him a half day off, he should be wearing a mask to perform the task at this time. Kenichi, sorry, I have to go later. Kakashi managed a smile. This is his friend, and he still wanted to explain. I know, it's okay, finish drinking before you go. Amamiya Kenichi smiled more naturally. Kakashi wasn't surprised, but took it and finished it in one gulp. It was still the familiar taste. Then he stood up and said goodbye to his friend, and then left Amamiya Kenichi's house. Amamiya Kenichi also smiled and sent Kakashi out, and the moment Kakashi turned his back, Amamiya Kenichi suddenly struck. The majestic yang attribute chakra was almost refined to the extreme by Amamiya Kenichi at this moment, and then all of it was injected into Kakashi's body with his palm. Kakashi, who was completely unprepared, trembled. He only felt that he had been hit in the back, and then a huge chakra poured in, and at the same time, a dizzy feeling surged up in his body. Under the dual effect, Kakashi didn't even have time to turn his head, and fainted at the door of Amamiya Kenichi's house. Sorry, Kakashi. Amamiya Kenichi looked at the unconscious Kakashi and showed a smile. The mystical palm technique is a unique medical ninjutsu that requires the ninja to accurately control the output of chakra, otherwise, too much yang attribute chakra output will cause coma. And after inheriting the first Hokage's sage body, his yang attribute chakra is still very considerable. Coupled with the anesthetic that Amamiya Kenichi smeared on the bottom of the cup, it was not surprising that Kakashi would be tricked without any precautions. It's really troublesome. If the research progress is completed now, I wouldn't need to ask the teacher for this eye. Amamiya Kenichi looked at the glass bottle in his hand and scratched his head. Inside was an eyeball soaking, which was his teacher Orochimaru's personal collection, a 3-tomo Sharingan of the Uchiha clan that the teacher collected during the Second Ninja World War. The teacher has 2 such eyes, and he asked for it for a long time before he got it from the teacher. Although it is very likely that it will not be able to hide it from Obito, but it doesn't matter. Amamiya Kenichi dragged Kakashi into his house, and then put him on the table. Now time is tight and the task is heavy, he doesn't have too much time to chat. Taking out the scalpel, Amamiya Kenichi carefully separated the Sharingan that he had longed for from Kakashi's eye socket, and then quickly put the 3-tomo Sharingan in. The whole process took a very short time. After all, to put it bluntly, changing an eye is not a very difficult thing. It's just that you need to master some basic medical ninjutsu, and the previous cooperation with Danzo requires mastering some medical ninjutsu, so Amamiya Kenichi naturally knows it. Using a scalpel is just because he doesn't want to be too rough. Mangekyo Sharingan, this is really a magical eye, I wonder if it can be studied. Amamiya Kenichi looked at the eyeball in his hand with interest, and then put it in a special glass bottle for preservation. After erasing the blood stains, Amamiya Kenichi dragged Kakashi to the bed and let him lie on it. Kakashi will be in a coma for a while, but it won't be too long. As time passed, a burst of crazy roars resounded throughout Konoha, and Amamiya Kenichi looked at the huge figure outside the window, and couldn't help but show a smile. The Nine Tails was finally released, so in this case, the death date of the fourth Hokage's couple can also be determined, unless Hiruzen Sarutobi suddenly rushes out to fight the Nine Tails desperately. But that possibility is about the same as Amamiya Kenichi suddenly creating a nuclear bomb directly by hand. Amamiya Kenichi helped Kakashi out. There were crowds of people running around, no one noticed them, which allowed Amamiya Kenichi to find a corner and throw Kakashi down. The streets are in chaos. Amamiya Kenichi casually picked up a mask from an unmanned stall next to him and put it on his face. Amamiya Kenichi remembered that the plot mentioned that on the night of the Nine Tails, a part of the Nine Tails chakra was collected by one person, and he also wanted to try to collect a part of the Nine Tails chakra. At that time, it can also be restudied. You must know that the guy who is not a Nine Tails Jinchuriki can rely on these Nine Tails chakra to realize the tailed beast cloak. Kenichi, where are you going? A gentle voice. Amamiya Kenichi stiffened, turned his head and saw his teacher Orochimaru. Teacher, I want to go collect some of the Nine Tails chakra, Amamiya Kenichi said, scratching his head, but still honestly stating his idea. To be precise, he also wanted to take the opportunity to collect some experimental materials. The Nine Tails night was a night where many people died, even with the entire Anbu mobilized, many still perished. Perhaps it would have been better if Root had also participated, but so far, Amamiya Kenichi had only seen Anbu, not a trace of Root ninjas. He guessed they had gone to the Uchiha compound. After all, the Mangekyo Sharingan in the eyes of that giant Nine Tails monster was very conspicuous. And as everyone knows, only the Uchiha clan in the ninja world possesses the Mangekyo Sharingan, so it was not surprising that the Uchiha clan would be monitored. Since he would die if he didn't collect them, he might as well collect as much as possible while he had the chance. Perhaps he could even scrape together some experimental funds, which would be a good thing. Nine Tails chakra, your idea is a bit dangerous. Orochimaru glanced at the rampaging monster and the ninjas who were rushing up only to be knocked away, and smiled. Nine Tails, the strongest existence among the tailed beasts, was currently wreaking havoc in your beloved Konoha village. So, where was the third Hokage, who always claimed to be for Konoha and willing to dedicate everything to it? But then Orochimaru's eyes turned cold. He saw his teacher, Hiruzen Sarutobi, leading Anbu ninjas to attack the Nine Tails, trying to lure it out of Konoha. This made him a little unhappy. In Orochimaru's mind, the third Hokage should have been watching the show and waiting for the fourth Hokage to handle it. He didn't expect him to be performing in front. Truly hypocritical, teacher. Clearly, you alone are enough, right? Besides, aren't those Chunin just going to their deaths? Orochimaru greatly despised his teacher's affectation. Would the dignified ninja professor be unable to attract the Nine Tails' attention? Wasn't this just wanting to perform and prove that he cared about Konoha? Teacher, how about taking the opportunity to collect some materials and experimental funds? Right now, everyone is too busy to care about these things, Amamiya Kenichi couldn't help but ask. Teacher had been looking in the direction of the Nine Tails just now, and he didn't know what teacher wanted to do. Amamiya Kenichi remembered that teacher didn't seem to have any role in the Nine Tails rampage. He certainly wouldn't go up to attack the Nine Tails, otherwise, he would have been mentioned more or less. Quote. You can. Orochimaru stopped paying attention to the situation there. The appearance of the Nine Tails was dangerous, but there were also opportunities. He could take the opportunity to collect many things, such as the Forbidden Scroll in the Hokage building. As for the Nine Tails, Orochimaru didn't care. With the third and fourth Hokage, a Nine Tails couldn't turn the sky upside down. So, Amamiya Kenichi was assigned to collect materials and scrape together funds. As for Orochimaru, according to him, he was going to collect more important things. Amamiya Kenichi was a little confused at first, but immediately he knew what his teacher wanted to do. After all, after following his teacher for so long, Amamiya Kenichi also knew very well that his teacher's wish was to exhaust all the ninjutsu in this world, and at this time, the defense of the Hokage building was very lax, even non-existent. If teacher took action, he would definitely be able to obtain the Forbidden Scroll, and then master more powerful ninjutsu from it. This was also a good thing for Amamiya Kenichi. So, Amamiya Kenichi ran to collect funds. After all, Compared to the lively, crying, and screaming materials, these money that didn't speak, didn't struggle, and were easy to store were much more suitable for collection. Just as Amamiya Kenichi was happily collecting, he noticed a lump of unknown stuff wriggling beside him. The moment he looked over, a sense of fear surged into his heart, as if he had seen the most evil thing in this world. Chakra energy. Amamiya Kenichi frowned, and then became ecstatic. This thing was likely the Nine Tails chakra. Only the tailed beast's chakra could possibly retain a period of time after leaving its body. Without thinking, he took out a sealing scroll and sealed the chakra inside. Looking at the scroll in his hand, Amamiya Kenichi was very satisfied. This trip was really worth it, and he could also get the Nine Tails chakra. Just as Amamiya Kenichi was ecstatic in his heart, he suddenly felt the fluctuation of ninjutsu. He directly teleported to the right without hesitation, dodging the water dragon that attacked from behind. At the same time, he quickly formed hand seals. Fire release. Dragon fire technique. With a large amount of chakra mobilized, a stream of fire directly rushed towards the direction where the water dragon was released, but as the flames ignited the houses there, Amamiya Kenichi didn't see anyone. Even the sound disappeared, only the raging flames and collapsed houses. Amamiya Kenichi carefully guarded against the enemy. The opponent launched a sneak attack without any words, aiming to take his life. But soon Amamiya Kenichi had to leave. He had to leave because the burning flames were so dazzling at night, attracting the attention of the Anbu. If he didn't leave, he wouldn't be able to escape. Directly attacking me, it's possible it's Root, but it's more likely it's that guy who collected the Nine Tails chakra on the Nine Tails night. Amamiya Kenichi thought as he ran. He felt that the latter was more likely. After all, Root was ruthless and would not give up until the mission was completed. If it was Root, they would likely follow him and continue to attack. But he waited for a long time and didn't wait for any subsequent attacks, which could only prove that the other party was afraid of attracting the attention of the Anbu. Then the most likely person was that guy who collected the Nine Tails chakra. Amamiya Kenichi didn't remember his name, after all, he wasn't an important character. However, he didn't expect that the other party would dare to attack just now, completely disregarding that this was Konoha, and not caring about the trouble it might bring later. He was really decisive enough. It seems that I will need to have a good chat with you then. Amamiya Kenichi's expression was not very good. This time, if he hadn't reacted quickly, he might have capsized. Although Amamiya Kenichi didn't know the other party's specific name, he knew that the other party was one of the 12 guardian ninja of the Fire Country's daimyo. When the time came, he would kill all of them except Asuma. No, Asuma also seemed like he could die once in a while, but he would talk about it later. And at this moment, Amamiya Kenichi felt a huge amount of energy gathering. He turned his head and glanced at the Nine Tails direction. The giant monster had opened its mouth, and an ominous energy was gathering in its mouth. It was a tailed beast ball. Chakra is truly a miraculous power. Even though he already knew about the existence of the tailed beast ball, Amamiya Kenichi could still feel the pressure when facing it directly. For a moment, Amamiya Kenichi even felt like he was back in high school, with the heart-pounding feeling of being caught using his phone by a teacher. But the target isn't the village, but the Hokage Rock. Amamiya Kenichi watched the tailed beast ball fly overhead and noticed the target of the attack. However, the tailed beast ball didn't explode, but disappeared instantly. At the same time, a huge explosion sound came from the distance. Amamiya Kenichi understood that the fourth Hokage probably intervened. The Flying Thunder God technique is truly a powerful ninjutsu. It can even transfer the tailed beast ball. Doesn't that mean it can also transfer thermobaric weapons and fuel air explosives? If he leaves a mark at the target location, then instantly teleports a thermobaric weapon over, and then quickly retreats to detonate it, the destructive power would be too strong. It's practically a strategic level ninjutsu. No wonder Minato Namikaze is hailed as the Yellow Flash. Extreme speed is indeed a form of power. Have you ever been kicked by light? For some reason, Amamiya Kenichi couldn't help but associate Minato Namikaze with Kizaru from next door, which made him shiver. Impossible, Minato Namikaze isn't like Kizaru. Watching Minato Namikaze disappear and the Leaf Village ninjas attacking the Nine Tails again, Amamiya Kenichi yawned. He was destined to have no involvement in this major event. No, it seems there are things he can do, such as the newborn Naruto Uzumaki. His bloodline might hold some secrets. Amamiya Kenichi really wanted to study how Naruto Uzumaki, as the reincarnation of Asura was affected by his bloodline. And can Asura be stripped away from Naruto? What will Naruto, no longer the reincarnation of Asura, grow into in the future? Amamiya Kenichi was very curious. Thinking of this, Amamiya Kenichi decided to give it a try. If he didn't try, Amamiya Kenichi would feel like he was missing out. Of course, he could choose to wait until Naruto left the village for a mission in the future to obtain Naruto's blood, but the problem is that would take a long time, and he didn't want to waste that time. Moreover, Amamiya Kenichi remembered that there was a perfect opportunity during this time period. Fourth Hokage, your son shouldn't be by your side, right? Amamiya Kenichi muttered to himself. He didn't remember much of the plot, but he remembered that the fourth Hokage first placed Naruto somewhere else. This time point could be a perfect opportunity to obtain Naruto's DNA information. However, after searching around, Amamiya Kenichi reluctantly gave up. The fourth Hokage didn't put his son Naruto in his house. Amamiya Kenichi didn't find Naruto there. Umbilical cord blood is also an option, but the problem is, where is Kushina giving birth? Even the teacher doesn't know. Amamiya Kenichi sighed. He originally wanted to seize this opportunity to collect it. But he didn't expect to lack enough information, and this plan could only be abandoned. He can infiltrate Konoha to collect it when little Naruto grows up a bit in the future. Collecting it then shouldn't be too late. The funds are almost ready, and some instruments have been obtained. Amamiya Kenichi stroked his chin. Originally, he planned to grab a few consumables, but now the people in the village have basically run away. He wandered around for a while and didn't see any suitable consumables. This made Amamiya Kenichi a little disappointed, but looking at the nine tails displaying its might, he thought of something. If I were the fourth Hokage, then I would definitely put Naruto in a safe place, a place that wouldn't be threatened by the nine tails, a place that is hidden enough. Amamiya Kenichi fell into thought. It's definitely not possible in the village. Although the third Hokage is trying hard to drive the nine tails out of Konoha, even a little aftermath would be enough to kill Naruto in his current state. So it's definitely not in the village, and may even form a diagonal line with the location of the nine tails, becoming the farthest and least likely place to be attacked. Thinking of this, Amamiya Kenichi firmly walked towards the other side of the village. He ran quickly, not knowing how long Obito could hold the fourth Hokage. He only needed to know that he had to hurry. It might be here. Amamiya Kenichi kept checking one room after another, but to no avail. Just as he was about to give up, he found that he seemed to have found his target, a room with a simple protective barrier applied to it. This protective barrier was very hidden. If Amamiya Kenichi hadn't touched it, he wouldn't have known that there was a protective barrier here. Amamiya Kenichi knew that this was likely Naruto's hiding place. Fortunately, the protective barrier temporarily set up by the fourth Hokage wasn't very strong. In order to take care of the concealment, he sacrificed a certain amount of defense. This made it easier for Amamiya Kenichi. After breaking the seal, he saw the tiny Naruto in the room. Amamiya Kenichi didn't hesitate to take out a test tube to collect a strand of Naruto's hair and a drop of blood, and then he hurriedly left. As soon as Amamiya Kenichi left, Minato Namikaze appeared in the room. He gasped for breath and looked around nervously, then held Naruto in his arms. Seeing that his son was okay, Minato Namikaze breathed a sigh of relief. Is Madara Uchiha still alive? What a terrifying enemy. Minato Namikaze covered his waist. He felt the barrier being attacked just now and wanted to come back. But Madara Uchiha's fierce attack delayed him, and the anxious Minato Namikaze took a hit before returning here. The barrier was broken, but Minato Namikaze didn't understand. He was worried about his child before, but fortunately, Naruto was okay. He noticed someone running away outside before, but at that time, he was more concerned about Naruto's safety. Now that he confirmed Naruto's safety, the other party had also run far away. He can only deal with the person suspected to be Madara Uchiha and the Nine Tails first. Amamiya Kenichi returned to the teacher's laboratory. He didn't have to worry about being monitored at this time, everyone was very busy. Teacher Orochimaru was busy recording the forbidden techniques in the Forbidden Technique Scroll. The third Hokage was busy driving the Nine Tails out of Konoha to reduce the damage to Konoha, and Danzo and Root were busy besieging the Uchiha clan. Obito was busy beating up his teacher. Amamiya Kenichi felt that being a teacher in the Naruto world was really a dangerous thing. The blackened disciples would drag them out to prove their path at every turn. It's good to be busy. Amamiya Kenichi stretched his back and then went into the underground laboratory. It didn't matter to him whether they were fighting to the death outside. In the manga, Minato Namikaze didn't mention much after putting Naruto down, but I think it's a bit rough to not set up any barriers, so I simply set it up as a hidden protective formation. Don't worry too much about this issue. Things have taken a turn. Amamiya Kenichi had heard of the butterfly effect, but he never thought he would one day become the butterfly flapping its wings, causing such a huge change. The fourth Hokage is dead. In that respect, he was indeed a qualified Hokage, Orochimaru said, looking at the grieving villagers of Konoha and Minato Namikaze lying in the coffin, unable to help but sigh. He never thought Minato Namikaze was a qualified Hokage before. The opponent's strength was just so-so, and his achievements were not as outstanding as his own, but last night, Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, sacrificed himself. For the sake of Konoha, Minato Namikaze, who had just taken office as Hokage, gave everything, including his own life and the life of his wife. Konoha was plunged into intense grief. The ninjas and villagers who died in the Nine Tails Night became a list, and the thin paper carried the weight of life. But the high-level combat power of Konoha also had problems. Teacher, why did the third Hokage lose an arm? Amamiya Kenichi felt that a pupil earthquake could no longer describe his feelings at this moment. The grief-stricken third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, was mourning his wife, Bawako Sarutobi, but that was not the point. The point was that the third Hokage was missing an arm. Missing a left arm. This is not right. Amamiya Kenichi remembered that although the third Hokage's wife died, he himself was fine. He was reappointed as Hokage with all his limbs intact and began a new Hokage life. But at this moment, the third Hokage lost his left hand. Last night, the fourth Hokage was injured in a battle with a mysterious person, and then Orochimaru told the story of yesterday. Amamiya Kenichi was not strong enough, so naturally he didn't know. When he learned that it was because the fourth Hokage was injured that the Nine Tails released the second-tailed beast ball, and in order to stop the Nine Tails tailed beast ball from rushing towards the center of Konoha, the third Hokage rushed up. But the suddenly appearing mysterious person chopped off the third Hokage's left hand, and then disappeared under the combined attack of the third Hokage and the fourth Hokage. However, it also successfully solved the threat of the tailed beast ball. The following story was similar to what Amamiya Kenichi knew. The fourth Hokage still sacrificed himself and successfully solved the Nine Tails. Then, teacher, next, the position of Hokage. Amamiya Kenichi blinked. He always felt that this world seemed to be against him. Hiruzen Sarutobi lost an arm, so can he still become Hokage again? I don't know. Orochimaru squinted his eyes, not knowing what he was thinking. Amamiya Kenichi glanced at his teacher strangely. Could his teacher be thinking of becoming Hokage? That's impossible, right? But looking at Hiruzen Sarutobi, who had lost an arm, Amamiya Kenichi became less confident. After all, in the current Konoha ninja village, besides teacher Orochimaru, there seems to be no one else suitable to become the fifth Hokage. The third Hokage's reputation has indeed risen a lot, making up for the impact of the previous third ninja war, but losing an arm is also a fact, which will definitely have an impact on combat power. Jiraiya happened to be not in the village, which made Amamiya Kenichi a little incomprehensible. After all, it stands to reason that Jiraiya would not be here at such an important time as the birth of his disciple's wife, which is really strange enough. However, Amamiya Kenichi remembered that the important plot point of the Nine Tails Night was also dug out with various bugs in his previous life, so it doesn't seem to be unreasonable. Teacher, what about Lord Jiraiya? Amamiya Kenichi couldn't help but ask. He just happened to be not in the village. Orochimaru's mouth had a hint of sarcasm. If Jiraiya was in Konoha, maybe Minato Namikaze wouldn't have died, right? The corners of Amamiya Kenichi's mouth twitched. Is this the convergence of the world line? Anyway, Minato Namikaze has to die in the Nine Tails Night no matter what. It doesn't seem strange that Jiraiya is not here. Lord Orochimaru. Kakashi walked over, and Amamiya Kenichi's expression was a little unnatural. Kakashi is still alive, and he doesn't seem to have noticed that his eyes have been replaced, but Amamiya Kenichi still feels a little unnatural when facing Kakashi. He is always worried about whether Kakashi will notice any problems. What's wrong? Orochimaru glanced at his disciple out of the corner of his eye. He noticed the fleeting tension in his disciple. Could it be related to Kakashi? Orochimaru was thoughtful. Lord Third Hokage asked me to inform you to go over. Kakashi is still very respectful to Orochimaru, but the red eyes prove that his mood is not calm. Kakashi is really unlucky. First he lost his friend, and then he had to let his teammate die in his own hands. Now it's good, his teacher and his teacher's wife are also dead. If Kakashi was a pure Uchiha, he would probably have opened the kaleidoscope. Okay, Orochimaru smiled, and then left, without any intention of calling Amamiya Kenichi. Amamiya Kenichi took a deep breath, and then looked at Kakashi, who was standing silently beside him, not knowing what he should say for a while. Kakashi, my condolences. Amamiya Kenichi knew that this was the time to test his acting skills. Amamiya Kenichi confirmed that Kakashi did not know about yesterday's events, or to be precise, he did not know the real situation. After all, Amamiya Kenichi knocked Kakashi down before Kakashi turned his head. Kenichi, are you okay yesterday? I seem to have been knocked unconscious. Kakashi looked at Amamiya Kenichi with red eyes, and what he said made Amamiya Kenichi breathe a sigh of relief. I'm sorry, I only saw a black shadow flashing by yesterday, and then I passed out. Fortunately, the teacher came to save me. Amamiya Kenichi said with a face full of apology. His strength is not as good as Kakashi's. Kakashi didn't see clearly, and it's reasonable for him to be like a weak chicken and faint directly, right? It's good that you're okay. Kakashi tried to widen his eyes, then turned around and walked away. Amamiya Kenichi saw that Kakashi seemed to be mobilizing chakra, and it seemed that he was mobilizing it to his face. Is he wiping away tears? Amamiya Kenichi didn't know. Looking at the villagers and ninjas around him crying because of the loss of their loved ones, Amamiya Kenichi took a deep breath and silently followed the head of the Akamichi clan in front of him. As a disciple of Orochimaru, one of the three ninjas, Amamiya Kenichi's position is only behind the major families of Konoha, so he can go to mourn the fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze in advance. It is also the last time to look at the fourth Hokage's remains. Amamiya Kenichi's hand stroked the edge of the coffin, then glanced around and silently held a strand of yellow hair in his palm. Orochimaru sensei had been gone for a long time. The fourth Hokage's funeral started in the morning and ended at noon, but even after the funeral, Kenya Amamiya didn't see his teacher. Sensei isn't really going to become the fifth Hokage, is he? Kenya Amamiya scratched his head, thinking it would be hilarious if that were the case. He knew his teacher had always wanted to become the new Hokage of Konoha, though not desperately. Kenya Amamiya knew his teacher harbored such expectations. However, after Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, was chosen, his teacher seemed to have given up on that idea. No, there's another possibility. Kenya Amamiya thought of the third Hokage's missing arm. Although the third Hokage had lost his left hand, who was his teacher? He was Orochimaru, a man who mastered the strongest technology in the ninja world. Now that the third Hokage had lost a hand, he needed to solve this problem if he wanted to become Hokage again. If there was anyone in Konoha village most likely to help the third Hokage solve this problem, Kenya Amamiya felt it was no one but his teacher. Forget it. Kenya Amamiya stopped thinking about these things and returned to his and his teacher's laboratory, a smokescreen set up by his teacher. There weren't any excessive experiments or shady things inside, so Kenya Amamiya could come and go as he pleased, though he still needed to be discreet. Kenya, you must know that the more openly you display something, the less others will care. But if you carefully hide it, they will pay more attention. That's what his teacher said. Kenya Amamiya thought it made sense. If the third Hokage investigated and found this place, it could serve as a cover. Assuming Sensei needs to help the third Hokage solve this problem, there are probably three solutions. Since this laboratory couldn't be used for anything too extreme, Kenya Amamiya had nothing to do. He simply started thinking about how to solve the problem. First, use cloning to create an arm for the third Hokage and transplant it. Kenya Amamiya thought this was the most suitable. However, the problem was that his teacher didn't seem to have mastered cloning technology well enough, so he might not choose this method. Second, try to create an arm using the first Hokage's cells. Kenya Amamiya shook his head and crossed out this idea. This idea was completely unfeasible. The first Hokage's cells had powerful corrosive properties. Danzo needed to use the eyes of the Uchiha clan to achieve a delicate balance. The third Hokage wouldn't choose this. After all, he was the Kage of a village, it would be bad for his reputation if word got out, and it would also intensify the conflict with the Uchiha clan. So, the most likely option was the first, using cloning technology to transplant an arm. Kenya Amamiya twirled the pen in his hand. He had a third method. I remember there are metals in the ninja world that can conduct chakra. If I use these metals to make a mechanical arm, wouldn't that solve the problem? Kenya Amamiya thought this idea was also very good. Flash is weak, mechanical ascension. Ultimately, the biggest problem with losing an arm is the inability to form hand seals and use chakra, which is very troublesome for ninjas. Metals with good conductive properties could replace this function, and given the third Hokage's status and wealth, getting the best metal wouldn't be a problem. Most importantly, a mechanical arm meant that secret mechanisms could be embedded. If he needed to be enemies with the third Hokage in the future, he could use this mechanism to make the arm malfunction or even seriously injure the third Hokage. However, Kenya Amamiya wasn't sure what the third Hokage would choose. Just as Kenya Amamiya was slowly drawing design sketches, he heard the sound of the base door opening. He turned around and saw his teacher walking down. Kenya, what are your thoughts on restoring Hiruzen Sarutobi's arm? Orochimaru's expression wasn't good, but he became interested after seeing the drawings on his disciple's desk. So, he simply asked. Kenya Amamiya understood that the third Hokage didn't intend to let Orochimaru become the fifth Hokage but was trying to solve his arm problem and then become Hokage again. Sensei, I have 3 ideas. Kenya Amamiya quickly told Orochimaru his ideas. Orochimaru was calm when he heard the first and second, as he had considered them as well. But when he heard the third, Orochimaru showed an interested expression. Using conductive metal to create a mechanical arm to replace a normal arm. Orochimaru became interested. He originally thought his disciple would come up with another solution. Yes, sensei, the practicality of an arm made this way is quite good. Kenya Amamiya nodded, adding that the combat power would also be good. After all, how could flesh and blood compare to the strength of cold metal? However, taijutsu ninjas like Guy, who constantly train their bodies, might be an exception. Interesting. Since you have such an idea, do you have a plan for how to make it specifically? Orochimaru intended to hear his disciple's opinion. Although the old guy Hiruzen Sarutobi had already thought of a solution, Orochimaru was also very interested in mechanical arms. Hearing his teacher ask this, Kenya Amamiya generally explained his ideas. In general, he could try to make a mechanical arm according to the method of making puppets in the Sand Village, but it would be more precise. The nerve conduction problem could also be solved by manipulating puppets. At that time, the mechanical arm could quickly form hand seals according to the wearer's wishes, and it could also conduct chakra and occasionally resist kunai and poisoned weapons, making it quite practical. It was just that the investment might be relatively large, as metals that could conduct chakra were quite expensive, and the better the quality, the more expensive they were. A very interesting idea. I'll allocate some experimental funds to you later. You can research this thing in your spare time. Orochimaru was very satisfied. His disciple could always provide novel ideas. Then, sensei, what did the third Hokage choose? Kenya Amamiya was a little curious about this question. He plans to transplant someone else's arm. After all, this method saves the most time, and he wants me to clone an arm for him as soon as possible. Orochimaru sneered. It seemed his teacher was also anxious. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe for more videos.